Marvel. I created a sanctuary in Marvel Universe. Chapter 21. Interesting. He actually got involved in the vampires' murky business. The Hand's surveillance personnel, hidden in the shadows, watched Yifeng and Blade walk out of the hotel side by side, and couldn't help but feel surprised. They hadn't expected the two target individuals to team up. Contact Deacon immediately. This is an excellent opportunity, Madame Gao decided decisively, realizing this was a rare chance. By joining forces with the vampires, their success rate in hunting Yifeng would greatly increase. One mission, two hefty commissions, it couldn't be more cost-effective. The reason they were monitoring Blade was also because Deacon had previously posted a bounty for him with the Hand. After all, vampires couldn't move freely in broad daylight, their limitations were too great. The Hand quickly relayed the message to Deacon. Oh. He's actually associating with people from the church. Deacon's brows furrowed when he received the message. He, of course, knew Yifeng. The successful capture of the vampire elders in one fell swoop was, to some extent, due to the pressure Yifeng created. If Yifeng hadn't continuously swept through vampire strongholds, forcing the Elder Council to hold frequent emergency meetings, he wouldn't have succeeded so easily. If he dares to come, then kill him too. A crimson gleam flashed in Deacon's eyes. The blood god sacrifice ritual was just one step away from completion. His plan to become the king of vampires, and even the king of the world, had already begun, and he would not allow anyone to interrupt it. The Hand's forces were also being mobilized urgently. Deacon's ancient castle was now fortified like an iron barrel, with countless experts guarding it in plain sight and in secret, making it incredibly secure. Clarice, you'll act with Blade later. Deacon has prepared everything needed for the ritual. You just need to charge in and wreak havoc. Yifeng and the two others quietly arrived at a high ground near the ancient castle and quickly finalized their plan. Clarice once again received Yifeng's elemental blessing, but this time it was the power of light element, and a faint, sacred white glow emanated from her body. After Blade and Clarice disappeared into the night, Yifeng turned to look at the vast, silent wilderness behind him, his voice calm yet clear as he spoke. You've followed for so long, aren't you going to show yourself? In the silent night, dark figures emerged soundlessly from the ground. Dressed in black bodysuits, they moved as lightly as cats, each carrying a Japanese katana on their backs, their eyes cold as iron beneath their masks. So it's you bunch of trash. Yifeng's eyes narrowed slightly. He sensed the flow of chi from these ninjas. As far as he knew, on the entire Earth, there were only two places where chi could be systematically cultivated. One was the secret realm of Taro, and the other was Kunlun. Both were ancient secret realms located in the east. Thus, the identity of these ninjas was self-evident. The Hand, traitors of Kunlun. Although Yifeng didn't have much affection for the Kunlun of this world, these scumbags who betrayed their homeland and fell into darkness disgusted him even more. Clang. The sound of blades being drawn rang out one after another. No one answered, only the most primitive killing intent permeated the air. Dozens of figures flickered like ghosts, attacking Yifeng at an extremely fast speed. The 5 leaders stationed at the Hand's headquarters looked grim. There was a serious error in the data. We miscalculated. Madame Gao's face was unsightly. The expressions of the other 4 were also not good. Because they clearly saw from the surveillance footage that Yifeng's stance was as steady as a mountain, with no flaws around him. This meant he was a master, far exceeding their estimates. This was an extremely powerful martial artist, not just a mutant. Buzz. Facing the attacking shadows, Yifeng did not move his feet, he merely glanced up. A vast storm of psychokinesis suddenly spread, and the ground seemed to be overturned by an invisible giant hand. All the ninjas who were charging at high speed instantly froze. From extreme motion to extreme stillness, it was but a moment. The next instant, everyone was violently thrown back. Several of the closest ninjas had their internal organs crushed by the psychokinesis on the spot, falling to the ground lifeless. This scene caused the 5-finger leaders in the headquarters to change their expressions dramatically. The abilities Yifeng displayed once again exceeded the scope of their intelligence, with no repetition. Yifeng slightly raised his right hand and clenched it in the air. The surrounding flowers, plants, and trees seemed to be infused with life, beginning to grow wildly, and in the blink of an eye, they tightly entangled all the dark figures, locking them to the ground. Killing you would be pointless. It's better to use your lives for something more meaningful. As Yi Feng murmured, the ninja's life force began to be stripped away, transformed by the surrounding plants into the purest life energy, which then condensed in Yi Feng's palm. In just a few seconds, several emerald green beads, brimming with immense vitality, had already formed. And the ninjas entangled by the plants all turned into shriveled corpses. How can he be so strong? Alexandra was somewhat dazed. Sawande's face was uncertain. The power Yi Feng displayed was enough to hold a place even in Kunlun. Just then, the surveillance footage abruptly cut off. They didn't see the final scene. Yi Feng simply threw a punch, and the power of the cosmos surged out of his body, revealing atomic-level destructive power. All the corpses instantly evaporated, and even the most advanced instruments could not detect any trace. The hand, dragon bone. Too bad, it's of no use to me. Yi Feng looked at the quiet wilderness, his eyes devoid of emotion. He was pensive. Why would the hand target him for no reason? But the most important thing right now was to resolve the blood god sacrifice ritual. At this time, the battle inside the ancient castle had entered a fierce stage. Clarice's spatial portals continuously flickered between the corridors, her fists imbued with scorching light element. Wherever she went, the vampires scattered as if encountering their nemesis. Yi Feng no longer lingered outside. He took a step, his figure seemingly merging into the night, and the next moment, he appeared directly in the deep hall of the ancient castle. Roars and screams filled his ears, and the smell of blood assailed him. Deacon was frantically directing his subordinates, completely unprepared for how powerful the people from the church were. Suddenly, his vision blurred. A figure appeared silently before him. The white robe with gold trim was particularly striking in the bloody battlefield. An extreme sense of crisis pierced Deacon's brain like an ice pick. Yi Feng's eyes narrowed slightly, and psychokinesis pressed down like a mountain, firmly restraining Deacon in place and slowly lifting him into the air. Are the Darkhold pages with you? Yi Feng got straight to the point, unwilling to waste words. I don't know what you're talking about. Deacon's eyes flickered, still trying to bluff. Interesting. You actually hid it inside your body. You're really not afraid of death. Yi Feng sensed for a moment, then suddenly chuckled. He clearly sensed an abnormally obscure and ancient dark fluctuation within Deacon's body. PFF'd. Accompanied by the soft sound of tearing flesh, an ancient, blood-stained page slowly rose from Deacon's abdomen, floating in midair, revealing its mysterious and ominous true form in the dim light. As the tattered page of the Darkhold emerged, a dense and ominous power spread like a tide, instantly engulfing the entire ancient castle. The air seemed to condense with whispers, and the candlelight on the walls flickered without wind, constantly dimming and brightening. What is that thing? Blade's face instantly turned pale the moment he saw the tattered page, as if he was being fiercely suppressed by some high-ranking existence, making even breathing difficult. I don't know, but it's definitely not a good thing. Clarice took a deep breath, trying to calm the turmoil in her heart. A nerve in her brain was frantically warning her, reminding her that she absolutely must not touch the tattered page emitting strange fluctuations. It is indeed a tattered page of the Darkhold. To find it, the price you paid must have been considerable. Yi Feng's gaze fell on the suspended paper, his tone calm. He looked up at Deacon, who at this moment had an ashen face, having given up even his last struggle. Yi Feng's power was overwhelming to him, he had no ability to fight back. Deacon even couldn't help but wonder if he could truly contend with this unfathomable man even if the blood god sacrifice ritual was completed. Crack. After receiving confirmation, Yi Feng's eyes didn't even change. His telekinetic power suddenly pressed down, and Deacon was crushed into dust before he could even let out a scream. So strong. Blade's pupils contracted. This was the first time he had personally witnessed Yi Feng in action. The other party's biggest movements were merely looking up at people and speaking, yet he so easily crushed his great enemy, whom he had fought bitterly for many years. Only now did Blade gain some real understanding of Yi Feng's power. Your Excellency, what exactly is this? Clarice couldn't help but ask curiously. Although the tattered page gave her an extremely ominous feeling, Yi Feng's attitude suggested that this item was extremely valuable. This page involves an ancient Loki, it is the crystallization of his knowledge and power. For me, it has high reference value. Yi Feng explained, his gaze still fixed on the tattered page. The Marvel Universe does not have magic in the traditional sense, all magic is essentially a borrowing relationship. Spellcasters borrow power from dimensional Loki, and the Loki then has the right to dispose of his followers. More tolerant Loki like Vishanti would at most conscript their mages to participate in dimensional wars after their deaths, while Loki like Dormammu and Nightmare would demand souls and life force at every turn. After completing the Earth's order change, Yi Feng's next goal was to become a dimensional Loki. Therefore, the structure and power system of the Darkhold held great reference significance for him. Is this the power of the dimension? Yi Feng sensed the decaying and ominous fluctuations on the tattered page. Now is not the time for deep contact. He muttered to himself, and the book in his hand automatically floated into the air. The pages turned without wind, and profound runes flowed out from within them. These were divine art runes from Athena in the Saint Seiya world. In this world without Athena's divine blood blessing, the power of the runes was greatly reduced, but with the cosmos and elemental power of Yi Feng, it was barely enough to seal a single tattered page. As the runes coiled around the tattered page of the Darkhold like chains, the unsettling aura was gradually isolated and suppressed. Finally, the tattered page slowly submerged into the book in Yi Feng's hand, disappearing from sight. Prepare for the blood god sacrifice ritual. Yi Feng withdrew his gaze and said to Blade. His main objective had been achieved, helping Blade was merely a matter of convenience. In the dark dimension, Blade's intelligence channels could compensate for the current deficiencies of the Church. Having long lacked extraordinary power, the Church's understanding of the dark dimension was far from what it once was. Clarice was just a microcosm of the Church's extraordinary plan. The old Pope's willingness to accept Yi Feng's identity as a mutant was partly because the Church was indeed on the brink of collapse, and partly because the Church had long been implementing a mutant nurturing plan. They sought out young mutant and funded their upbringing by the Church. The faith of these children was more steadfast than anyone else's, which was the biggest difference between the Church and those laboratories and capitalists. The blood god sacrifice ritual proceeded unexpectedly smoothly, as Deacon had already prepared everything. According to the ritual recorded in the Darkhold, Blade, using his own blood, extracted the purest blood essence from over a dozen pure-blooded elders. That was a source power almost as strong as that of second-generation vampires. Blade swallowed it without hesitation. Under the impact of the immense blood power, his human side was gradually covered by his bestial nature, and his eyes glowed blood red. Buzz. Just as Blade was about to lose control, an immense oppressive sensation suddenly descended. He stumbled and fell to his knees, yet he also benefited from the misfortune, as the bestial nature within him was forcibly suppressed by this external force. How do you feel? Yi Feng looked at Blade. The other party's aura had surged several times in an instant, completely transformed. This feeling, it's amazing. It's simply incredible. Blade looked at his hands in disbelief, feeling the surging power within his body. Not bad. With your current strength, you are more than capable of contending with those old monsters, the second and third generation vampires. Now is the best time for you to take over the vampires. Yi Feng nodded. Take over the vampires. But my long-cherished wish is to destroy the vampires. Blade was momentarily stunned. The birth of the vampires originated from the Darkhold. As long as the Loki behind the Darkhold is not destroyed, the Darkhold cannot be completely destroyed, and Dracula, who is born from it, will not truly die. In other words, the vampires cannot be eliminated at this stage. If you truly want to eliminate the vampires, taking it over is actually the best way. Yi Feng explained indifferently. What do you mean? Blade did not doubt Yi Feng's words. Various signs indicated that the other party knew many secrets. You can use the power of the vampires to search for other parts of the Darkhold. It records the method to completely eliminate the vampires. Yi Feng looked at him. Upon hearing this, Blade's breathing suddenly became heavy. He had made it his mission to eliminate the vampires for many years but had always seen no hope, yet he unexpectedly found a clue from Yi Feng. I understand. I will do my best to take over the vampires. You can always find me if you need anything. Blade nodded heavily. With that, his figure slowly merged into the shadow, disappearing from sight. Your Excellency, are we returning to the church now? Clarice ignored the departing Blade and turned to look at Yi Feng. There's one last thing to take care of. Yi Feng shook his head. Soon after, the culprits who attacked the church were declared vanquished, and the conflict between the church and the vampires, which had caused a stir in the underground world, also came to an end. But after this battle, various forces began to re-examine this ancient church. The power it possessed seemed to far exceed what the world imagined. It seems I'll have to meet him. Inside the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, Professor X Charles looked at the intelligence about Yi Feng in his hand and slowly furrowed his brow. Can mutants truly walk openly in the sunlight? Recently, the stir Yi Feng caused in the underground world had already spread to every corner. Many mutants hiding their identities had noticed this suddenly rising figure. Initially, when a bounty was placed on Yi Feng, most people didn't care. After all, in the underground world, there were at least 800, if not 1,000, mutants with bounties on their heads. Even Magneto and Professor X had long been at the top of the bounty list, yet who dared to trouble them? But this time, the direct conflict between the Catholic Church and the Blood Clan greatly shocked everyone. It was said that even the notorious The Hand was involved, but it ultimately ended with Yi Feng's overwhelming victory. Even more surprisingly, the Pope of the Catholic Church publicly addressed high-ranking officials of various countries for Yi Feng, declaring him to be the Church's divine messenger and future Pope. If he were to meet with misfortune, these countries would face the wrath of hundreds of millions of Catholic believers worldwide. After providing ample public display, the Pope then quietly conveyed the news that Yi Feng could regrow limbs and extend lifespans to some influential figures who had a need. Under the dual pressure of coercion and inducement, Yi Feng's existence was actually tacitly accepted by various countries. This was the first time in history that a mutant had formally entered the high-level global power game. This change gave countless mutants hope, the hope of living openly in the sunlight. It also planted a seed in their hearts. When they reached a dead end, perhaps the Catholic Church would be a good refuge. And this was exactly what Yi Feng wanted. Inside a quiet church, Yi Feng stood alone before a solemn cross. The book in his hand occasionally flickered with strange light, seven-colored radiance and dim black light alternated, as if two completely different forces were wrestling with each other. As expected of a page from the Darkhold. Such a level of power is truly incredible. In terms of status alone, that Pluto is probably above Apollo, an existence comparable to the ancient creator gods, possessing universe-level combat power. Yi Feng murmured, a thoughtful gleam in his eyes. His mental power continuously analyzed the mysteries contained within the Darkhold page. The deeper he delved, the more astonished he became. This was not a power he could easily touch at his current stage, which was why he had always been wary of directly interacting with this page. The Darkhold possessed the power to bewitch hearts. Anyone who practiced the black magic recorded within would unknowingly become a follower of Cthon, eventually being devoured by him and becoming Pluto's puppet in the real dimension. Even just one page caused Yi Feng's mind to occasionally feel disoriented. He clearly remembered that Wanda, on the sacred timeline, still suffered erosion from the Darkhold even after her scarlet power awakened, possessing father-level combat power. Doctor Strange, hailed as the strongest sorcerer supreme, also evolved into the eerie Dark Strange form due to the Darkhold. All this forced Yi Feng to be extra cautious. Ding! Just as he was fully focused on analyzing the Darkhold, his phone suddenly rang, interrupting his contemplation. You rascal, you've been making quite a stir lately. Logan's hoarse voice came through the receiver. The plan is going quite smoothly. And you? Yi Feng smiled faintly. Not so smoothly. No one believes a rough old man like me. Logan's tone was a bit dejected. It's all right. After this incident, more mutants should be willing to believe you. Our goal isn't something that can be achieved overnight, it requires patience. Yi Feng comforted him. He wasn't surprised. After all, Logan's consistent impression was that of a hothead, who would easily believe a hothead's words. Unless that hothead could provide sufficiently convincing evidence. Where are you now? Give me your coordinates. The matter of helping you break through your limits, which I mentioned before, is now feasible. Yi Feng continued. Both of them were currently in the United States, which was a good opportunity to meet. Once Yi Feng returned to the Catholic Church, he would become the focus of attention, every word and action scrutinized. According to the Pope's arrangements, Yi Feng needed to make appearances regularly to consolidate his position and couldn't leave the Vatican for too long. But now, with the ability of element control, Yifeng could temporarily escape public view. After receiving the coordinates from Logan, Yifeng hung up the phone. I hope my hypothesis is correct. He took a deep breath, and an elemental cloak instantly covered his entire body, causing him to vanish into thin air from the church. If anyone could have seen Yifeng's figure, they would have been astonished to see a stream of light shoot up from the church, cutting across the sky at an incredible speed and rushing towards the distance. Their agreed meeting place was not far. At Yifeng's current speed, it would only take a few minutes to cover hundreds of kilometers. His speed had already reached 3 times the speed of sound. Although he had just re-entered the initial stage of Cosmos' sixth sense, with the augmentation of element control, Yifeng's combat power was actually several points stronger than at the same period in his previous life. A few minutes later, Yifeng appeared before Logan, his elemental cloak slowly dissipating. Incredible. You crossed nearly 600 kilometers in less than 10 minutes. Logan looked at the suddenly appearing Yifeng, his eyes filled with shock. He still clearly remembered Yifeng's state when they parted a few months ago. It was a world of difference from now. Otherwise, how could we achieve our goals? Let's begin. My current identity is quite sensitive. I cannot be away for too long. Yifeng smiled. He didn't waste time and got straight to the point. All right. Logan took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and sat cross-legged on the ground. He followed Yifeng's instructions, trying his best to calm his excited mind. Yifeng also slightly closed his eyes, and the power of Cosmos began to burn. The stars within his soul started to revolve, and he once again saw that brilliant light of Cosmos. Buzz. Under Yifeng's conscious manipulation, a seed shimmering with starlight slowly separated. The seed of Cosmos, it actually succeeded. Yifeng himself felt a little surprised, not expecting the process of separating the seed of Cosmos to be so smooth. When he opened his eyes, a speck of light containing the mysteries of the universe's stars was pulsating in his palm. He gently pushed it, and the speck of light merged into Logan's glabella, perfectly fusing with him. The entire process was silent, causing no ripples. Seeing no unusual reaction from Logan, Yifeng pondered for a moment, then reached out and placed his hand on Logan's shoulder. Crash! The earth churned. A brown symbol was imprinted on Logan's body. That's it, Yifeng said. Logan opened his eyes upon hearing this, feeling the changes within his body. I've given you 2 types of power. One is the power of Cosmos, as mentioned before. This power requires your physical body to reach its peak, then merge with your soul, and ignite your own potential to awaken. The second is my element control blessing. With my enhancement, you can master and use the power of the earth element. It's for your self-defense and also a demonstration when recruiting members. As for the specific effects, you'll have to develop them yourself. Yifeng explained. Yifeng's words were very clear, and Logan immediately understood his intention. I understand. Logan replied. He could already clearly sense the brown elements swirling in the air, an unprecedented experience. He hadn't expected Yifeng to have reached such a level where he could even share his own mutant abilities with others. This was undoubtedly a huge advantage. Get rid of him at all costs. An angry roar echoed from the luxurious office on the top floor of a skyscraper. Outside the huge floor-to-ceiling windows, the city's nightscape sparkled like a sea of stars, but it did nothing to quell the rage of the person inside. Yifeng's existence had made him increasingly uneasy. Ever since he escaped the laboratory, he had been like a dragon entering the sea, stirring up one storm after another in the world. This sense of unease grew stronger each day, as if a tsunami was about to strike. The bounty from the underground world had failed, and the operation entrusted to the hand had also failed. He had exposed too much, and he had heard about the Pope's discussions among high-ranking officials in various countries. He couldn't understand why a mutant could stand at such a height. As a capital giant, he knew that under the drive of sufficient profit, he too could become a discarded pawn. But this realization only made him angrier. Boss. The assistant beside him hesitated, looking at his boss's bloodshot eyes, and finally swallowed his words. He was afraid that his advice would directly ruin his career, or even his life. Understood, I'll take care of it immediately. The assistant didn't hesitate, accepting the order. They still had 3 tactical teams under their command, totaling about 30 people. The last time, two teams were killed by Yi Feng, and among the remaining members, many wanted to avenge their comrades, while also coveting the valuable bounty. Since the boss had given the order, all he had to do was execute it. The power of capital revealed its true fangs at this moment. Money transformed into the most omnipotent weapon, buying through all obstacles. Yi Feng and Clarice's whereabouts were not deliberately hidden and were quickly discovered. Large sums of money were converted into various advanced thermal weapons and distributed to the three tactical teams. They made multiple contingency plans along the predetermined route, striving for a swift, fatal blow. Even Yi Feng's only ability analysis was thoroughly done by them. Everything was ready. In the church, Yi Feng's thoughts were interrupted by a sense of being watched. Interesting, still not giving up. He narrowed his eyes, a flicker of killing intent flashing within them. Ever since he came to the US, he had felt that someone was targeting him. The hand must have also been hired by that party. Recalling the bounty from the underground world, Yi Feng naturally knew who the mastermind was. He just didn't expect the other party's determination to be so great, wanting to completely eliminate him on US soil. Perfect, let's settle old and new scores together. Yi Feng didn't think too much, deciding to proceed as planned. The other party was definitely more anxious than him. Time passed, and Yi Feng, according to his original plan, set off with Clarice to return to Vatican. During this time, the feeling of being monitored never ceased. Yi Feng's mental power also saw the combat teams monitoring him, which were identical to the teams he encountered when he escaped the laboratory. Captain, almost all combat model predictions are accurate. Route B, should the mission continue. On the other side, the team monitoring Yi Feng did not realize they had been discovered and simply acted according to the original plan. Proceed as planned. Kill him. Greed gleamed in the captain's eyes. The bounty on Yi Feng's head had even surpassed that of the two major mutant powerhouses. This was a desperate gamble by capital. Even some mutants were tempted by it, secretly monitoring Yi Feng's itinerary. Up until now, Yi Feng's power was only rumored, and very few people had witnessed him in action. Some even believed that Yi Feng's existence was the Holy See, creating a god. The Holy See, having lost its extraordinary power, was gradually being marginalized by the extraordinary world. They needed a so-called divine messenger to salvage their declining fate, which was why they introduced a mutant. The vehicle drove on a secluded road. Yi Feng closed his eyes to rest, while Clarice focused on driving. Anticipating an attack, Yi Feng did not hire a driver. This small city had no airport. To reach Rome directly, one needed to transfer in a larger city first. This was also an opportunity Yi Feng deliberately left for the other party. Your Eminence, something seems off. Clarice also noticed the anomaly. Don't worry about it, keep driving forward. Yi Feng replied calmly. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Several rockets suddenly shot out from the jungle on both sides of the road, heading straight for Yi Feng's vehicle. Finally, they're here. Yi Feng's lips curved slightly, and the elemental power fluctuated abruptly. Boom. A huge explosion erupted, and fire engulfed the entire vehicle. Target hit. Repeat, target hit. The tactical team members' eyes were filled with excitement, as if they could already see the surging balance in their bank accounts. Whoosh. However, the next moment, a storm suddenly rose, blowing away the fire from within. A dazzling blue light screen appeared in front of Yi Feng, with a startled Clarice behind him. He's fine. The tactical team members' expressions changed drastically. Fire. The order was given, and countless bullets rained down on the two. The silent night was instantly torn apart by gunfire. However, all the bullets were intercepted by the dazzling blue light screen about a meter in front of Yi Feng. Yi Feng, behind the light screen, remained unfazed. He was waiting for the mastermind to reveal more clues. Monster. Captain, he's a monster. Looking at the light screen, which remained unmoving despite being covered in bullets, the tactical team members' faces turned pale. They realized that their lives were probably short-lived. Helicopter support also arrived at the scene, with its cannon furiously strafing the ground. Whoosh! The dazzling blue light screen fell like a waterfall, carrying all the bullets with it as they disappeared into the ground. Tell me who is behind you, and you can die a quicker death. Believe me, you wouldn't want to know how many ways there are to torture someone. Yi Feng's voice was not loud, but it clearly reached everyone's ears. Die. Die. Missiles launched from the helicopter, this was their last resort. Crystal wall. Yi Feng sighed softly, using the signature skill of Ares. The missiles suddenly froze in midair. Boom. An explosion erupted, but it was firmly encased by the crystal wall, with an explosion radius of less than 30 centimeters. Bang! It finally turned into points of light, dissipating in the air. How is that possible? Everyone watched this scene in a daze, as if they had witnessed a miracle. Buzz. A colossal pressure descended from the sky, and everyone was knocked to the ground by this sudden force. Some prostrated themselves, some knelt on both knees, all losing the ability to move. The helicopter also crashed directly under this immense pressure. I don't want to say the same thing a third time. Yi Feng's voice rang out again, cold and indifferent. You're asking for death. Clarice's furious voice suddenly rang out. A mutant had actually launched a sneak attack on them at that moment. Space rippled slightly, and the incoming bullets were instantly teleported away by Clarice. Good reaction. They're yours. I only want the result. Yi Feng nodded approvingly. He had already sensed that others were lurking in the shadows. Upon hearing this, Clarice's eyes narrowed, and she pushed off the ground with immense force. She shot out like an arrow from a bow, with such power that she left 2 deep cracks in the ground. So fast to react. The faces of the mutants who launched the attack from a distance changed drastically, a hint of shock flashing in their eyes. The timing they had meticulously chosen was instantly seen through and reacted to by their opponent, which was completely beyond their expectations. Stop daydreaming, that woman is charging over. Watching Clarice sprint towards them like a leopard, the elite squad of 5 mutants immediately tensed up. During this period, there were many rumors about Clarice in the underworld. A mutant cultivated by the Vatican, possessing rare space element abilities. She showed astonishing performance in multiple confrontations with the Blood Clan, almost achieving overwhelming victories every time she acted. It is said that she also possesses mutant abilities related to fire, able to condense high-temperature flames on her limbs, making her extremely powerful. Boom. A spatial portal instantly formed, and Clarice directly crossed a distance of tens of meters, unleashing a punch with flames coiling around her arm, tracing a scorching trajectory in the night sky. Through continuous battles, Clarice had almost fully adapted to the elemental blessing bestowed by Yi Feng. The dark night was illuminated by the scorching flames, and in the firelight, murderous intent gleamed in her emerald green eyes. The mutant directly in front was the defensive member of the squad. He abruptly crossed his arms, and his ability instantly activated. His skin rapidly petrified, forming a hard armor. In a rush, he could only take Clarice's thunderous blow head-on. Such heavy force. The stone-skin mutant's face contorted, and a tearing pain shot through his arms. The high-temperature flames attached to Clarice's arm caused signs of melting on the surface of his petrified skin, not to mention the terrifying impact accompanying the high temperature. His feet plowed 2 deep furrows in the muddy ground, and he was sent reeling backward by that punch. A 1 versus 5 battle instantly erupted. This mutant squad was fully equipped, including a tank, damage dealer, crowd control, and support. They had excellent teamwork and considerable combat power. The 2 sides went back and forth, and for a time, it was difficult to tell who had the upper hand. On the other side, Yi Feng stood still, waiting for the news he wanted. Don't even think about it, you mutant scum, you all deserve to go to hell. The captain of the squad seemed to know he couldn't escape death. Even though he was suppressed by Yi Feng's psychokinesis and couldn't lift his head, he still roared defiantly. Quite the backbone. Crack. As Yi Feng's words fell, the captain's pinky fingers were instantly twisted into 3 sections. Ah! The intense pain made him let out a mournful scream. I don't want to hear nonsense. Last chance. Speak, and I will let you die without pain. Yi Feng's voice was cold. Dozens of lives meant nothing in his eyes. His experience participating in the Holy War in his previous life had exposed him to too much death. Only by personally experiencing the wars of the Saint Seiya world would one understand what a desperate atmosphere it was, far beyond what anime could depict. To describe it as littered with corpses is no exaggeration. Several seconds passed, and besides the intense sounds of fighting in the distance, there was no response from anyone around. A flicker of impatience crossed Yi Feng's eyes, and his elemental power suddenly surged. He raised his hand, and countless elemental energies rushed like a tide into the bodies of the dozens of people in front of him. Ah! An indescribable pain instantly spread throughout their bodies, from the inside out, organs, nerves, bones, muscles. They were suffering the cruelest torture in the world. I will speak. It's the Rockefeller Consortium. The voice was intermittent, but Yi Feng heard it clearly. He slightly raised his right index and middle fingers, and the screams abruptly ceased. The dozens of people in the squad followed in the footsteps of their comrades, buried deep underground by Yi Feng. The battle on Clarice's side was still fierce. The mutant five-person squad worked together seamlessly, actually fighting her to a standstill. Clarice, step back. Yi Feng didn't want to waste time on such people. The teamwork of these five was quite skilled. They were clearly veterans who frequently took on bounties in the underworld. Hearing Yi Feng's words, Clarice immediately activated her ability, returning to Yi Feng's side via spatial teleportation. I will only ask one question. How many mutants have you hunted? Yi Feng's gaze swept over the five. The five did not respond, but the wariness in their eyes intensified. Yi Feng's power was a complete unknown, but from what they had just detected, this would undoubtedly be a tough battle. Seeing that the other party had no intention of answering, Yi Feng did not ask further. Stars appeared. The cosmos of the sixth sense's initial stage began to rise and burn. The cosmos, which originally only existed in the soul, materialized at this moment. Everyone present was enveloped by Yi Feng's cosmos domain. The patterns of the 88 constellations flickered and flowed behind him, finally settling on Virgo. 6 Paths of Reincarnation. Yi Feng raised his hand, unleashing one of Virgo's signature combat techniques. Your souls can only cleanse their sins in endless reincarnation. A holy radiance flashed, and the eyes of the 5 mutants in the squad immediately lost their luster, and their breathing ceased. Their souls had been completely banished by Yi Feng. After the reincarnation ended, the final judgment awaited them. The soulless bodies naturally lost all vitality, standing stiffly in place like comatose patients. Yi Feng casually threw a punch, and the punch wind swept across the ground. The bodies of the 5 instantly atomized, evaporating on the spot without leaving a trace. Let's go. We should go back. Yi Feng turned around. Although the vehicle he and Clarice were in was destroyed, the mutant squad's car was still intact. Your Eminence, are we not dealing with the mastermind? Clarice asked with some confusion. There are many ways to deal with things, killing is just the simplest one. Since it's a consortium, it will more or less be helpful to the Vatican. Furthermore, killing the leader of a major consortium would only push the Vatican to oppose all consortiums, which is detrimental to our future plans. Yi Feng responded calmly. His gaze was far-reaching as he continued, I want them to personally deliver the Rockefeller Consortium into my hands. The next day, news of the two appearing at an airport in a neighboring city quickly spread. Everyone in the underworld already knew that the famous mutant bounty squad had failed. They had carried out countless missions, almost never failing, but this time they not only failed but also lost their lives. Seeing that the two merely had slightly dirty clothes, everyone understood that the squad had not caused them any substantial hindrance. This also caused various forces to re-evaluate Yi Feng's strength. To date, few people had personally witnessed him act, leading to incomplete intelligence. The underworld was in turmoil, but none of this concerned Yi Feng and Clarice. They had already boarded a flight back to the Vatican, completely unconcerned by the ripples they had caused. Welcome back. The Pope personally stood at the entrance of the Apostolic Palace to greet Yi Feng. Your Holiness, the mission is complete. Yi Feng maintained basic respect for an elder. I know all about it. You did very well. The Pope nodded with satisfaction. He handed Yi Feng a document, his tone solemn. Also, take a look at this. This is. Yi Feng looked at the contents of the document with some surprise, not expecting the other party to actually send an invitation for a meeting. The documents the Pope handed over were an invitation from Charles Xavier. Professor X wanted to meet him. Interesting. Yi Feng looked at the invitation in his hand, a slight smile playing on his lips. He did indeed have the idea of meeting Charles. Ever since their brief conversation through Logan's body last time, he knew this meeting would come sooner or later. Alright, then let's meet. After all, we have to meet eventually. Yi Feng casually handed the invitation to Clarice. Professor X was one of the two great leaders of the mutants, a spiritual belief for many mutants for a long time, with countless followers, some even willing to die for him. Seeing Yi Feng accept the meeting invitation, the Pope immediately arranged for staff to reply to Charles. Inside the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, Phoenix, Jean Grey, walked into the study with the news that had just arrived from the Vatican. Professor, the Vatican has agreed to our meeting invitation. However, the meeting location is set for the Apostolic Palace in Vatican. She said softly. Charles sat in his wheelchair, gazing quietly out the window, and slowly turned around upon hearing her words. I understand, arrange a time, we will go to Vatican in 2 days. He had no objection to this meeting location. Or rather, he had absolute confidence in his ability to go anywhere in the world. Current technology had not yet developed to the point where it could completely block his telepathy, and there were not many items that could resist his abilities. After receiving Charles's reply, Yi Feng did not leave the Vatican, but merely meditated in the Apostolic Palace. The Hand, Yi Feng began to think about how to deal with this organization. Yi Feng didn't have much interest in the 5 leaders of the Hand. Although those 5 had entered the supernatural realm, they were at most at the initial level of the supernatural. However, the dragon bones in their hands did pique Yi Feng's interest. The dragon bones originated from the eastern secret realm of Kunlun, and were the bones formed after the death of the immortal dragon Shou Lao, possessing the miraculous effects of prolonging life and even bringing the dead back to life. And the one who defeated Shou Lao could receive his gift of Kai, and become the contemporary Iron Fist of Kunlun. However, judging from the performance in the Marvel Universe, the strength of successive Iron Fists varied. The strongest was Wu Fengji, who defeated and absorbed the Phoenix Force several centuries ago, while subsequent Iron Fists were generally not as strong as before, and even Danny Rand performed mediocrely. If he could obtain the Dragon Bones, or even directly find Shou Lao, Yi Feng would be able to obtain an inexhaustible source of life. This way, he wouldn't have to go to great lengths to extract life energy from nature. Simply put, an organization like the Hand, destroying 10 of them wouldn't be excessive. He already had an idea in his mind. Time quietly slipped away in meditation, and 2 days passed in a flash. Charles, Jean Grey, and Cyclops, Scott, had arrived at the Vatican. The 3, led by Clarice, walked through the solemn corridors to the depths of the Apostolic Palace. My lords, this is where my lord the divine emissary resides. Please wait a moment. Clarice politely led the 3 to the training ground next to Yi Feng's residence. Before Clarice could go in to announce their arrival, Yi Feng opened the door and appeared before the 3. This should be our first meeting in the true sense. Yi Feng spoke first, his gaze calmly sweeping over the 3. Indeed, I didn't expect you to grow so quickly. Charles said with some emotion. The last time he sensed Yi Feng, he was still very frail, and even with extraordinary abilities, he couldn't hide his disheveled state during his difficult times. But at this meeting, the other party's almost perfect appearance and transcendent temperament made his heart involuntarily tighten. The group sat in the lounge area next to the training ground, and sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful light and shadow on the floor. I wonder what Professor wants to discuss, having come all this way to see me. Yi Feng went straight to the point. I want to know, what exactly do you want to do? Your actions during this period have put great pressure on the mutant community. The original balance has been broken. Charles looked directly into Yi Feng's eyes. He paused, then continued, to my knowledge, many consortiums and high-ranking officials of various countries have taken action against you, and have even contacted me and Eric. Charles gazed at the handsome young man before him. The only thing that hadn't changed was his calm eyes. His dark pupils were like an abyss, making it impossible to discern what he was thinking. I merely want to use my own method to secure more living space for mutants. The Vatican is a very good cover, isn't it? Yi Feng responded indifferently. Are you trying to steal divine authority as a mutant? Like Apocalypse in the legends. Claiming to be a god. Enslaving all beings. Charles's gaze sharpened. Upon hearing these words, Jean Grey and Scott unconsciously shifted their positions, and the atmosphere instantly became tense. Clarice, on the other hand, stood behind Yi Feng, her eyes sharp, ready to act at any moment. In an instant, the air in the training ground seemed to solidify. I have no interest in becoming a god. It's just that under the current social structure, divine authority is the best cover. Yi Feng's voice remained calm. A mocking smile played on his lips. Moreover, you and Eric have fought for so many years, causing many incidents, and what results have you achieved? Throughout the history of mutants in the Marvel Universe, the timeline has been reset countless times, with almost no good outcomes. In Yi Feng's view, both Charles's and Eric's ways of handling things were too extreme. But at least we haven't made things worse. Charles responded after a moment of silence. Facing Yi Feng's questioning, he was momentarily lost in thought. Recalling carefully, he genuinely couldn't remember what substantial results he and Eric had achieved. It seemed they had always been in opposition, fighting, one planned, the other thwarted, caught in a peculiar cycle. Charles, with all due respect, do you really think you have made sufficient contributions to the existence of the mutant race? Yi Feng's gaze became sharp. He paused, then continued, not to mention things far away, just take this one beside you. His gaze swept over Jean Grey. She is a hidden danger far exceeding any previous crisis. What have you done? Or do you really think your existence is the stabilizing force, the nuclear weapon of the mutant race, sufficient to deter all those who covet mutants? Yi Feng's voice remained calm, but full of pressure. Then what about my experiences in the laboratory? What about the countless mutants who were experimented on? In his opinion, Charles's overly idealistic thinking contributed even less to the mutant race than Magneto's. What do you mean? Scott, standing behind Charles, became restless, his hand already on his visor. On the other side, Jean Grey's eyes also became complex. Literal meaning. Yi Feng responded calmly. Everyone goes their own way, in peace. If you really want to stop me, change my mind. He paused, his tone firm. Then we are enemies. The words fell, leaving no room for negotiation. Charles looked deeply at Yi Feng. This personal meeting gave him a deeper understanding of Yi Feng. The other party was not without ambition, but was good at hiding it, and knew how to proceed slowly. Moreover, Yi Feng being able to perceive the power within Jean, and daring to say such words, made him have some conjectures. An Omega-level mutant. Charles murmured to himself, his eyes growing deeper. If your existence is merely to prevent things from getting worse, then it is meaningless. It's even less meaningful than Eric's existence. Yi Feng's words were like a sharp blade, piercing directly to the heart without any pretense. The atmosphere in the training ground suddenly became stagnant, and the colorful light and shadow cast by the sun through the stained glass windows seemed to dim slightly. The three people in front fell into a long silence. Charles's fingers unconsciously rubbed the armrest of his wheelchair, while the other two frowned, with a hint of anger in their eyes. No matter what, I still hope that you can handle some matters with caution, Charles finally spoke, his voice tinged with weariness. He understood that he and Yi Feng were not on the same path at all. Given the other party's current status in the papacy, coupled with his own powerful strength, he would not be wary of him at all. The only thing around him that could make the other party wary was probably the unfathomable power within Jean's body. That's my business, no need for you to worry about it. If there's nothing else, this meeting can end. Yi Feng's tone was still calm, but it carried an undeniable decisiveness. He paused, his gaze sweeping over Jean Grey, and added pointedly, but I still need to remind you, it's better to guide than to block. If you keep suppressing her, a backlash will come sooner or later. The price you might have to pay then could be your life. Yi Feng gently placed the teacup in his hand down, the bottom of the cup clinking crisply against the saucer. Clarice immediately understood, stepping forward a few paces to stand before the three. The meeting is over. Please do not disturb His Holiness's meditation. Her voice was as cold as ice. If Clarice had initially held some respect for Charles, that respect was now completely gone. Charles was nothing like she had imagined. As the two spoke, she couldn't help but recall the dark years before she was adopted by the papacy. If it were truly as Charles said, that his existence was the stabilizing force for the mutant race, then what did all the suffering she had endured count for? She couldn't empathize with Charles's ideals. On the contrary, she felt an unprecedented sense of security from Yi Feng. Alas! Charles sighed softly, knowing that staying longer would be futile, and could only turn to leave. On his way out, Yi Feng's words echoed in his mind, "It's better to guide than to block. Was I really wrong?" He glanced out of the corner of his eye at Jean Grey beside him. He knew the hidden power within her better than anyone. When Jean first awakened her abilities, at only a few years old, she could simultaneously suppress both him and Eric. Such power was a mobile natural disaster, and once it lost control, the consequences would be unimaginable. After Charles and the other two left, the Pope arrived at Yi Feng's location. Sunlight streamed through the high windows onto the training ground, casting long shadows of the two. How did the talk go? Although the old Pope was neither an extraordinary person nor a mutant, he had heard of Charles. After all, Professor X was an existence that made many high-ranking officials wary. Too much compassion, too much of a saintly heart, constantly wavering between humans and mutants. Not a very good partner for cooperation. Yi Feng shook his head. He could indeed solve Charles's paralysis, but there was no need. Because, from the standpoint of humans and mutants, he could not gain Charles's full support. Each time Charles had an awakening, it was either when humanity was on the verge of exterminating mutants, or when a massive external force invaded, which even the combined forces of mutants and humans couldn't resist. Yi Feng didn't have that much time to contend with Charles. He needed to win over every possible force. The old Pope sighed upon hearing this, a hint of regret in his voice. Charles's power was strategic, it was a pity they couldn't cooperate. With his help, their plan's implementation would be much smoother. The matter you asked me to help with, I have already arranged. Representatives from some of the world's top financial groups are already waiting for you in the encrypted conference room. I hope you can persuade them. The Pope changed the subject. If Yi Feng's plan went smoothly, one Charles couldn't affect the overall situation. But if the other party remained stubborn, then he would simply have to be dealt with. Yi Feng's eyes lit up upon hearing this, and he followed the Pope to the conference room. This was a top-level encrypted channel conference. Even the world's most skilled hackers couldn't breach it in a short time. The high-ranking financial magnates on the screen did not show their true faces, and their voices were also specially processed. Even if recorded, it couldn't prove it was them. This group of people was extremely cautious, unwilling to leave any leverage for others. You are the mutant who escaped from the Rockefeller Group. I hear you can cure diseases, regenerate limbs, and even prolong life. A processed voice was the first to speak. Upon seeing Yi Feng appear on the screen, some high-level representatives couldn't sit still. The papacy daring to promote Yi Feng like this meant there was likely some real substance to it. And the aforementioned abilities happened to hit their pain points. As the people in the world least lacking in money and power, the only things that could threaten them were illness and lifespan. Gentlemen, please don't be anxious. The papacy contacted you all, certainly with the intention of cooperation. The content mentioned above is all true, you can find ways to verify it, and the papacy will cooperate at any time. Yi Feng smiled slightly, his tone calm. He didn't use any voice alteration, not even afraid if someone recorded him. He was even more eager for someone to promote him for free. What does the papacy want? Another voice asked, with a scrutinizing tone. Everyone in this position was no fool. The papacy going to such great lengths to contact them was nothing more than an exchange of interests. As long as the interests didn't conflict and there was room for cooperation, it was worth a try. What the papacy wants is very simple. Money, discourse power, status, and support. Yi Feng was direct. The papacy's rebuilding of the extraordinary requires a large amount of resource support. At the same time, you all need to acknowledge the international status and legitimacy of the papacy's extraordinary power. If necessary, I hope you all can employ the papacy's extraordinary individuals for security. Finally, if you encounter international disputes involving national threats to the papacy, your strong assistance will be needed. He clearly stated his objectives, and a murmur immediately arose in the conference room. You're asking for too much. Is the papacy trying to relive the glory of the Middle Ages? To rule the world with divine power? A cold voice spoke. Someone immediately saw through Yi Feng's ambition. And for security. Hiring people from the papacy, isn't that tantamount to entrusting our lives to the papacy? That's absolutely impossible. Another voice added. Regarding the conditions Yi Feng proposed, most of those present frowned. Some demands were too excessive, they saw no sincerity. Excessive. Not at all. Prolonging life is not a one-time thing. As long as you maintain a cooperative relationship with the papacy can provide services to you annually. Yi Feng's voice remained calm. He paused, then continued to throw out an enticing condition. Furthermore, if you are uneasy about the papacy's security, you can also arrange for trusted subordinates to come to the papacy, and I can bestow extraordinary power upon them. At these words, many people in the conference room began to breathe heavily. Immortality and extraordinary power, how many people dreamed of these? To what extent? For example, I am 85 years old this year, to what state can you restore my body? A voice asked eagerly. A one-time transaction and lifelong service are naturally not to be lumped together. Under the temptation of longevity, they were willing to make some concessions. And the point about bestowing extraordinary abilities made their eyes light up even more. If you want to know, why don't you see for yourself? Only by seeing it with your own eyes and experiencing it firsthand can you realize what the transaction between the papacy and you truly means, and if it's worth it. And don't worry, everyone, I won't lay a hand on you. After all, you are all prominent figures in the world, aren't you? Yi Feng directly laid bare their concerns. The temptation of immortality might make them hesitate for a while, but when death approaches or their bodies are on the verge of giving out, they will become the most desperate gamblers in this world, willing to bet everything for a chance to live. This was an overt scheme. He wasn't afraid that these people wouldn't trade with the papacy. Every bit of power the papacy offers, you are free to inspect, Yi Feng added, his expression calm, without a hint of worry. We will consider it. As the words fell, the meeting ended, and the signals disconnected. The screens darkened one by one, until only the empty conference room remained. These old geezers are still so afraid of death. The Pope witnessed the entire process and disdained their indecisiveness. Not everyone has such unwavering faith as you, willing to give everything for their beliefs, Yi Feng said with a smile, showing no signs of dejection. They will come, it's only a matter of time. Although the Pope scoffed at them, he also knew that these people held nearly half of the world's resources and wealth. They were definitely the most afraid of death because they couldn't bear to part with their hard-won wealth and status. So, the Pope wasn't worried. After the meeting, everything proceeded as planned. Yi Feng continued to train the only 4 Saint Seiya Reserve members in the Apostolic Palace of the Papacy. Whenever he had free time, he would meditate to improve his cosmos cultivation. With a reasonable schedule, Yi Feng also condensed a considerable amount of life origin force. However, those cautious old geezers still made no move, as if the video conference a month ago had never happened. Creak. The door of the meditation room slowly opened. Clarice stood quietly at the doorway, her expression respectful. What is it? Yi Feng sat cross-legged, suspended in midair, the colorful elemental energy swirling around him making him appear exceptionally sacred. He didn't open his eyes, merely asked faintly. Under normal circumstances, no one would interrupt his meditation. Your Eminence, His Holiness the Pope is looking for you. I heard something happened, involving a demon from Hell Dimension. Clarice reported respectfully. Hearing the word, demon, Yi Feng opened his eyes in surprise. Interesting. He lowered his crossed legs, his feet lightly touching the ground. He hadn't expected to hear news of a demon so soon. Yi Feng went directly to the Pope's room. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass window, casting colorful patterns on the ancient carpet. You're here. The Pope's previously anxious expression completely calmed the moment he saw Yi Feng. I heard there's news of a demon. Yi Feng looked at the Pope, awaiting his response. We're not sure if it's a demon, but it looks very similar. The Pope handed Yi Feng a document. This is a detailed report of the incident. One of the victims was a relative of a priest, and it was that priest who discovered the anomaly and reported it to the papacy. Yi Feng took the document, which clearly recorded all the details and on-site photos. I'll go take a look. Yi Feng didn't hesitate and immediately accepted the mission. Good. The Pope breathed a sigh of relief, then added with a solemn expression, also, Hell Dimension is real. If you encounter a demon, you must be careful. Clearly, in the Pope's understanding, bizarre incidents involving demons were more difficult to handle than simple massacres. I understand, don't worry. Yi Feng gently reassured the venerable old man. Leaving the Pope's room, Yi Feng went directly to the training ground. Savis, prepare yourself. You're coming with me on a mission. Yes, Your Eminence. The tall figure looked a bit tense. Clearly, Savis was somewhat nervous. It was still the papacy's special car travel mode. However, this mission wasn't very far, in a neighboring country, so there was no need for complex procedures. With the papacy's arrangements, they had a green light all the way, arriving at the incident location within 3 hours. As soon as Yi Feng stepped into the city, he noticed something unusual. A faint scent of sulfur permeated the air, and a strong demonic aura filled the entire city, sending chills down one's spine. Clearly, someone was deliberately performing a sacrifice, attempting to summon a demon from Hell Dimension. Interesting, there are even followers of Hell Dimension. Yi Feng muttered to himself. Although Earth was shrouded by Vishanti's grand formation, isolating direct contact between the real dimension and other dimensions, it wasn't entirely without loopholes. Mephisto, one of the lords of the Hell Dimension, frequently projected himself to cause trouble within Earth. However, it was clearly impossible to project stronger forces. If the Ancient One was alarmed, even within Hell Dimension, Mephisto would be harassed. If he stepped out of Hell Dimension, he would be severely beaten by the Ancient One. That was the glorious record the Ancient One had forged over hundreds of years. So, generally, unless there was a major event, even a Dimension Lord would not easily invade Earth, even though Earth was a nexus of reality and dimensions. Yi Feng also wanted to know which demon dared to be so bold as to cause trouble right under the Ancient One's nose. Could it be one of the 7 great monarchs? Without further delay, Yi Feng and Savis quickly arrived at one of the crime scenes, where the priest's relative was murdered. Who are you? The police sealing off the area asked with some hesitation, seeing Yi Feng and Savis's attire. We are from the papacy, responsible for handling this case. Please make way. Yi Feng nodded in acknowledgement. Hearing they were from the papacy, the police didn't obstruct them, allowing the two to enter the scene. The crime scene was surrounded by yellow police tape, and the air still carried a faint smell of blood and an indescribable scent of decay. Is that His Excellency the Legion Commander? A priest cautiously approached Yi Feng, his expression respectful yet uneasy. He had recently received a reply from the papacy, stating that the commander of the Star Saint Legion would personally handle this matter. That was the highest-ranking official of the papacy's armed department, which made the priest feel somewhat overwhelmed. It's me. Are you the victim's relative? Please tell me the basic situation. Yi Feng's gaze swept across the scene. Understood, Your Excellency the Legion Commander. The priest immediately divulged everything he knew. The victim was my younger brother's wife's granduncle, also a theology enthusiast. He usually enjoyed studying theology and had some understanding of various divine systems, especially Hell Dimension. The priest paused, his voice trembling slightly, but according to the family, from a week ago, his condition was clearly off, like he had become a different person, constantly muttering about some ritual, some sacrifice. At the time, they didn't pay attention, thinking he had discovered some lost theological text again. But unexpectedly, 2 days ago, he died. The priest's voice deepened. He died a very tragic death, his internal organs were hollowed out, arranged according to an unknown formation, and his body was placed in the center of the magic circle. This is an unknown sacrificial ritual, and I couldn't handle it, so I reported it to the papacy. Yi Feng listened quietly, his gaze scanning the scene. Dark red bloodstains remained on the ground, outlining a bizarre symbol, and the demonic aura in the air grew increasingly strong. I understand. You should go back and rest. We'll handle things here. The Holy See will take care of this matter. Upon hearing this, Yi Feng nodded slightly, watching the pale priest stumble away. Only he and Savis remained at the crime scene. Savis cautiously stepped half a pace closer, lowering his voice to ask, Your Eminence, do demons truly exist in this world? His eyes held a trace of undisguised fear, yet also a glimmer of excitement. Could the legendary Hell Dimension also be real? Yi Feng didn't answer immediately. He surveyed the crime scene. A faint scent of sulfur still lingered in the air, mixed with the smell of candlelight and old wood. What you really want to ask is whether heaven also exists, right? Yi Feng turned his head, seeing through the other man's thoughts. Savis gave an embarrassed smile, his fingers unconsciously rubbing the holy emblem hanging on his chest. The hell dimension does exist. Yi Feng's voice was calm but carried an undeniable weight. And it's an extremely dangerous place. Don't harbor any curiosity about the hell dimension, Savis. He paused, his tone softening slightly. As for heaven, as long as you believe, it exists. He didn't tell Savis that heaven had been silent for many years. Light in this world was gradually waning, suppressed by the ever-spreading darkness. Whether among the ancient gods, the celestials, or abstract entities, gods representing light were hard to find. Without further words, Yi Feng turned and began to meticulously inspect the scene. A bizarre symbol was drawn on the ground, composed of complex geometric lines and indecipherable text, with dried dark red bloodstains remaining in its center. He frowned slightly, having only recently reawakened his memories. His understanding of the Holy See's records concerning the hell dimension was limited, and this symbol was beyond his comprehension. Photograph it and send it back to the Holy See. Have them find out which demon this symbol belongs to. Yi Feng instructed. Savis immediately complied, taking out specialized equipment to photograph it from multiple angles. Although he couldn't identify the symbol's origin, he could feel the powerful aura emanating from the air. Yi Feng secretly estimated that if this demon's true form in the hell dimension, it would likely possess Skyfather-level strength. Such a powerhouse would be considered top-tier even in the vast reality dimension. No wonder it dares to cause trouble so openly, Yi Feng murmured to himself. Just then, his eye caught sight of a familiar attire. A man in a cloak, wearing an arcane pendant on his chest, stood silently in the shadows beyond the cordon, as if merging with the surrounding darkness. Come in and take a look, friend, Yi Feng said in that direction. The man in the shadows was visibly startled, then slowly walked out of the darkness, revealing a sharply defined face. Are you speaking to me? He asked with some surprise, his gaze scrutinizing. Who else? Isn't the Sanctum Sanctorum specifically for handling these kinds of matters? Yi Feng smiled faintly. Upon hearing this, the man's surprise deepened, but he quickly regained his composure. I didn't expect the commander of the Saint Seiya Legion of the Holy See to know about the Sanctum Sanctorum. He said as he elegantly stepped over the cordon and approached Yi Feng and Savis, his gaze immediately drawn to the symbol on the ground. How is it? Can you identify which one it is? Yi Feng asked. The sorcerer gazed at the symbol and formation on the ground, his brow furrowing deeper. An old friend. He finally sighed. He really is persistent, isn't he? Just then, Savis's device beeped. Your Eminence, the Holy See has sent back information. It's Valak, the Duke of Serpents, one of the 72 Pillars of Solomon. He quickly scanned the data, his voice involuntarily rising. The 72 Pillars of Solomon. Yi Feng raised an eyebrow. No wonder he possessed Skyfather-level strength. The strongest among the 72 Pillars of Solomon even possessed God-level combat power, making them powerhouses even within the Hell Dimension. The Hell Dimension is the most unique of all dimensions, formed by an infinite division, where almost all Hell gods from various pantheons can claim a place, and the 72 Pillars of Solomon are undoubtedly among the best. Exactly, it's him, the sorcerer confirmed with a nod. He's been quiet for a long time since we sent him back to the Hell Dimension last time. Valak is a rather troublesome demon, with an extraordinary obsession with the reality dimension. His tone revealed a sense of gravity. But with the Vishanti's grand formation, how could he bypass it and directly descend into the reality dimension? Yi Feng questioned. The Vishanti's grand formation uses Earth as its vessel, constructing protection through 3 sanctums. Even an entity like Dormammu, the Dark Dimension Lord, couldn't forcefully break through, and Mephisto could only send down a projection. How could Valak descend into reality with a simple ritual? You actually know about the Vishanti's grand formation. The sorcerer was surprised again. Although it wasn't a top secret, few outside the Sanctum Sanctorum knew about it, and the Holy See's understanding of it should be quite limited. Actually, you have a misunderstanding, the sorcerer explained. The grand formation itself is not impregnable, otherwise, the Sanctum Sanctorum wouldn't need to guard it constantly. It wouldn't be difficult for those demon gods to destroy an unguarded grand formation. The true purpose of the grand formation is, first, to isolate the reality dimension from other dimensions, preventing endless harassment from weaker demons, and second, to weaken the power of extremely strong entities. He pointed to the ritual pattern on the ground. For example, this Duke of Serpents, Valak, whose true form in the Hell dimension indeed has Skyfather-level power. But after descending with the aid of a ritual, even I could fight him. The Vishanti's grand formation is never omnipotent. Yi Feng pondered. Indeed, in various parallel universes, Earth had been invaded by demon gods many times, and demon smuggling incidents also occurred frequently. The Vishanti's grand formation served more as a filter and weakening mechanism. The true guardians had always been the Sorcerer Supremes. After the Ancient One's death, the grand formation was even destroyed by Dormammu's followers. Had it not been for Doctor Strange wielding the Time Stone, Earth would have long fallen. As for entities like Chthon, the god of the underworld, and Set, the great destroyer, their power even surpassed the Vishanti, and the grand formation had limited restrictions on them. What truly constrained them were Mother Earth Gaia and the God-Eaters slumbering in the reality dimension. Thinking of this, Yi Feng suddenly understood. We are one step too late. He has already descended into the reality dimension through the ritual. This is likely to be a fierce battle. The sorcerer's voice pulled Yi Feng back from his thoughts. Yi Feng gazed at the symbol on the ground, which seemed to still be subtly wriggling, and calmly ordered, since the ritual is here, he will certainly descend at this location. We can simply wait for him. Savis, notify the evacuation of nearby residents. Yes, Your Eminence. Savis realized the gravity of the situation and immediately began contacting the Holy See. Yi Feng did not place all his hopes on the Sanctum Sanctorum. Since the Holy See had decided to return to the extraordinary world, it was inevitable that they would deal with the Hell dimension in the future. Moreover, he himself held a strong investigative interest in dimensional demon gods. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone to such lengths to search for fragments of the Darkhold. Now that he had the opportunity to personally experience the power of the Hell dimension, he naturally wouldn't miss it. The Holy See's efficiency was extremely high, and soon the sounds of evacuation could be heard in the distance. Aren't you afraid of causing panic by doing this? You know that in this era, the existence of demons and gods has been infinitely downplayed. The sorcerer looked at Yi Feng with some surprise. That's exactly what I want. Yi Feng's lips curled into a smile, his eyes flashing with a sharp glint. Valak, one of the 72 demon gods, had a reputation that was both resounding and powerful, exactly the opponent he needed. Currently, the relationship between mutants and humans was growing increasingly tense, filled with mutual suspicion and antagonism. But what if a threat from Hell emerged? When humans faced demons that couldn't be restrained by technological weapons, would they still be so insistent on fearing mutants? Human weapons might be able to suppress the X gene, but against true hellish demons, their effectiveness would likely be minimal. Savis, record the scene well. You don't need to participate in this battle. Yi Feng stretched his shoulders and neck, a long dormant fighting spirit igniting in his eyes. Understood, Your Excellency. Savis was startled at first, then nodded solemnly. A battle involving a demon god was indeed beyond his ability to intervene. If it were just low-level demons, he might stand a chance with his physical enhancement abilities, but facing an existence like Valak, even if not in his complete form, was far beyond what he could contend with. The sorcerer from the Sanctum Sanctorum took a deep look at Yi Feng and couldn't help but recall what Ancient One had once said. Yi Feng's appearance would be a transformation for this era, and an indispensable aid. As expected of Sorcerer Ancient One, he mused silently. As early as his first meeting with Yi Feng, he had recognized his extraordinary essence. Beneath that flawless exterior lay a power that even made him tremble. It wasn't just mutant abilities, it was a profound energy, vast and ancient, like a sea of stars. As a grand sorcerer who had long fought on the front lines against dimensional demon gods, with a status second only to Ancient One, he trusted his intuition. As the surrounding personnel were thoroughly evacuated, the blood array on the ground suddenly twisted, the array patterns wriggling and shimmering like flesh, emitting an unsettling hum. Buzz. A blood-red pillar of light suddenly shot into the sky, dyeing the dark night crimson. What is that? The crowd, already evacuated dozens of kilometers away, could still clearly see the terrifying light. Only then did many belatedly realize how close they had been to danger. Some frantically pulled out cameras, attempting to record this unimaginable sight. Not only that, but several previously affected locations also simultaneously lit up with blood-red light. The light spread and connected across the earth like a living thing, eventually forming several blood-red portals. A dense aura of hell emanated from them, carrying the scent of sulfur and destruction. Clatter. Accompanied by the grating sound of scales rubbing against the ground and a deafening roar, two ferocious dragon heads abruptly emerged from the largest blood gate. Upon the dragon's back sat an entity with two wings and the appearance of a child. The Earl of Serpents, Valak, had officially descended. The Sorcerer Supreme was on full alert, his expression grave. He had arrived at the scene a step too late. Even destroying this node now could not prevent Valak's descent. The trope of simply destroying part of an array to interrupt a ritual, as seen in movies and TV shows, was pure fantasy in reality. The sacrifice had been made, the ritual completed, destroying the grand array now was too late. Impressive aura. Yi Feng remained in place, his gaze sharply fixed on the enormous serpentine creature. His robe flapped in the strong winds stirred by the two-headed dragon's roar. Buzz. Yi Feng's cosmos began to burn. The blood-red sky seemed to be torn open by an invisible force, and brilliant starlight covered the firmament. The originally eerie and oppressive atmosphere was replaced by a sacred and magnificent aura. The power of the stars enveloped this world like a tide. Crystal wall. Yi Feng spread his arms, and golden light shot up from the ground. Since he had determined Valak's descent range, he naturally wouldn't sit idly by. Even if the opponent wasn't a Skyfather-level entity, allowing him to act unrestrainedly would destroy cities within hundreds of kilometers in a mere flick of a finger. One must remember that even an existence like Magneto, who had not yet reached Skyfather level, once nearly shifted the global magnetic field, endangering the entire planet. A crystalline energy wall rapidly extended from Yi Feng's palms, instantly enveloping the entire blood array. This is the Sorcerer Supreme, standing behind Yi Feng, his pupils constricted. His intuition was not wrong. Within this man's body and soul, there truly was a universe. Savis, moreover, gazed at the scene before him with fervent eyes, unable to contain his excitement. This was a miracle. Only at this moment did he truly realize what the power of the cosmos, which Yi Feng had always emphasized, truly meant. It's you again. Sorcerers of the Sanctum Sanctorum. Valak immediately noticed the blue-robed figure behind Yi Feng, and his eyes instantly welled up with savagery and disgust. He had been driven out by the Sanctum Sanctorum more than once, and he hadn't expected to encounter his old nemesis again upon this descent. Valak, your ambition to invade the reality dimension is destined to be shattered. The sorcerer stepped forward, his voice steady and firm. Ancient One isn't here. With just one grand sorcerer like you, who can stop me? Valak showed a childlike, innocent smile. If not for the two-headed demon dragon beneath him exuding a terrifying aura, no one would be able to associate this face with a demon. Too much nonsense. Yi Feng couldn't be bothered to waste more words with this demon god. The ground beneath his feet violently cracked, and his figure shot towards Valak like a cannonball at supersonic speed. Seeking death. Valak's eyes sharpened. A mere mortal, daring to approach him in close combat. Even if he hadn't descended in his true form, he would not tolerate such an insult. Boom. The two figures, vastly different in size, violently collided. A visible impact wave spread wildly in all directions. A storm erupted within the crystal wall, and trees and remaining buildings were torn to shreds in the blink of an eye. A natural disaster. This is a natural disaster. Savis muttered, looking at the destructive scene within the wall. The evacuated crowd in the distance also clearly witnessed the dazzling interplay of light and shadow in the sky, like a rainbow. Each collision stirred up a hurricane. If Yi Feng hadn't set up the crystal wall beforehand, even retreating dozens of kilometers, they would not have escaped the repercussions. Roar. Valak's two-headed dragon let out a painful shriek, its scales shattering inch by inch, bleeding profusely. The child on its back had blood weeping from his eyes. In this close-quarters engagement, he had actually fallen into a disadvantage. Valak could not accept it. Countless serpentine shadows suddenly appeared in the sky, hissing and swarming towards Yi Feng like a torrential rain. The descent of 10,000 snakes, the mere sight was enough to strike fear into one's heart. Yi Feng's expression remained calm. Star charts rotated in the sky, and the 88 constellations shone brightly. Finally, the Gemini star chart hung high above. He slowly pushed his hands forward, palms facing each other. Although it was only the early stage of Sixth Sense, far from unleashing the full power of this move, it was more than enough to deal with Valak before him. Several brilliant orbs of light, like stars, condensed and exploded between his palms. Galaxian explosion. The greatest arcana of Gemini, reappearing here. Extreme light and heat surged forth, as if a galaxy were collapsing, a destructive torrent of energy sweeping away everything. Valak's face drastically changed. The torrent of 10,000 snakes instantly evaporated before the starlight, and the avatar he had descended in also began to show cracks. He had completely underestimated this seemingly mortal opponent, who could actually confront him head-on with pure power. A torrent of starlight, like exploding stars, surged and swept across everything, vaporizing all in its path. Impossible. How can a mortal possess such power? Valak's childlike face twisted with shock and fury, almost unable to maintain his original form. He watched everything before him in disbelief. For this descent, he had made ample preparations. Using his own primordial power as a guide, sacrificing carefully selected offerings, and even at great cost, unleashing power far beyond what a normal projection could withstand. Yet now, he was being pushed back, step by step, by a mere mortal. There wasn't a trace of divine or abyssal aura on his opponent, he was purely a mortal, yet so formidable. In his extreme rage, Valak let out a roar that echoed through the heavens and earth, fully concentrating his remaining demonic power to construct a dark barrier covered in runes before him. The stellar torrent continuously slammed into this bulwark, creating deafening roars. The two-headed dragon beneath him wailed incessantly, its once indestructible scales were long shattered, and now became a fatal weakness. Even a few stray wisps of starlight grazing it were enough to shatter large portions of the dragon's body, revealing charred flesh. Boom! Another violent explosion erupted in midair, the terrifying energy shock even causing the crystal wall Yi Feng had set up earlier to violently distort, its surface rippling. Can it still hold? The sorcerer of the Sanctum Sanctorum's face turned pale as he muttered to himself. He knew that if he were caught unprepared by the aftershocks of a battle of this magnitude, even he would struggle to survive. Without delay, he quickly formed hand seals, and an orange-yellow magic circle expanded from his palms, desperately reinforcing the nearly shattered crystal barrier. Savis, standing beside him, trembled all over, almost unable to grip his camera. It was the most instinctive fear of life facing power far beyond its own level. Moreover, he was just a teenager, barely a dozen years old, and had never witnessed such a doomsday-like scene firsthand. Rumble. The energy, with nowhere to dissipate, ultimately struck the earth. Centered on the battlefield, the ground for dozens of kilometers around began to shake violently, as if a high-intensity earthquake had erupted. The crowds and vehicles that had not yet retreated, though outside the core combat zone, were still forced to stop by this cataclysmic tremor. Several trucks transferring personnel and supplies braked sharply amidst the jolting, passengers panicked, and many couldn't help but exclaim in alarm. Doomsday. Has doomsday arrived? Immediately after, they truly witnessed what it meant for the earth to be torn apart. Bottomless fissures rapidly spread from afar, expanding wildly like a spiderweb. One or two vehicles even stopped right at the edge of a newly formed chasm, just a meter or two from plunging into the abyss. The relief of surviving a disaster intertwined with an even deeper fear in everyone's heart. Inside the crystal wall, the energy aftershocks gradually dissipated. Yi Feng's white robe with gold trim was severely damaged in the fierce battle, the upper body clothing completely torn, revealing a well-defined physique brimming with astonishing power. Mortal fabrics are indeed difficult to withstand this level of confrontation. The crafting of the saint cloth must be put on the agenda. He frowned slightly. Although his current physical strength was sufficient for the present battle, once he encountered higher intensity confrontations, his current defense would still be insufficient. A saint cloth that could perfectly resonate with his cosmos would undoubtedly become a crucial safeguard. Mortal. Valak's roar sounded again, the sound wave carrying magic power dispersing the surrounding smoke and dust. Countless shattered stones floated up, then, as if pulled by an invisible force, shot towards Yi Feng. But upon approaching his body, they disintegrated into countless atomic light points, silently dissipating. Incompetent rage. Yi Feng's tone was calm. Compared to his own mere damaged clothing, Valak's appearance was utterly miserable, The two-headed dragon beneath him was on its last breath, one dragon wing completely broken, and the other reduced to mere remnants. And the demon's childlike main body was covered in blood, demonic blood continuously gushing from his wounds, dripping onto the ground with corrosive hissing sounds. Very well. Even if it means sacrificing this incarnation, I will drag you into hell. Valak laughed in extreme fury. Between the two horns on his head, a heart-stopping dark magic power began to converge. The high compression of energy even caused the surrounding light to distort. Once you fall into my domain, I have 1,000 ways to make you wail for eternity. Is this your last trump card? Yi Feng casually tore off the already shattered remnants of his robe from his waist, and his figure suddenly blurred. He was never the type to stand idly by, waiting for his opponent to charge up a big move. Get lost. Valak, equally experienced in battle, unhesitatingly detonated the dying two-headed dragon beneath him. The immense flesh and blood energy transformed into a crimson barrier protecting his entire body. This was his desperate, final defense. Bang! 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 A series of continuous heavy blows sounded almost simultaneously. Yi Feng's fist pressure, like meteors, slammed onto the blood-colored barrier, each strike causing the barrier to violently vibrate and cracks to spread. Die! Valak shrieked, and the destructive energy condensed between his horns finally erupted. A torrent of magic power, black intertwined with crimson patterns, shot straight out, moving at a speed beyond the limits of visual capture. However, Yi Feng did not dodge. Behind him, the star map of Virgo suddenly lit up, and brilliant golden light emerged from the void. Immovable. His deep voice seemed to carry the power of some decree. Virgo's greatest defensive arcanum then unfolded, a golden light wall flowing with countless Sanskrit symbols majestically appearing before him, steadily receiving the demonic magic power capable of annihilating a city. Vidyaraja. As Yi Feng spoke again, the golden light wall erupted with an even more intense and brilliant radiance. Not only did it provide perfect defense, but it also completely bounced back the opponent's power, even with greater force than before under the amplification of his cosmos. How is this possible? Valak's pupils suddenly constricted, the ferocity on his face completely replaced by shock and incomprehension. He didn't even have time to react before he was completely engulfed by the torrent of magic power he had released, only to have it returned with double the force. His incarnation crumbled inch by inch, finally dissipating without a trace in a blinding flash of light. The torrent did not stop, continuing to rush towards the sky, piercing through the crystal wall, which had lost Yi Feng's power to sustain it, and finally disappearing into the clouds. A terrifying energy storm spread at high altitude, instantly clearing the originally dense dark clouds, revealing a clear sky. This unusual energy eruption was captured almost simultaneously by monitoring agencies and observatories in multiple major countries around the world. An explosion of this magnitude. Is it a nuclear test? Energy readings abnormal. Source unknown. Many intelligence departments immediately fell into a state of tension and suspicion. You really are reckless. The sorcerer of the Sanctum Sanctorum looked at Yi Feng's figure and let out a long sigh of relief. He naturally understood the reasoning behind Yi Feng's final act of directing that destructive energy towards the sky. Although he was not a mutant, as one of the sorcerers guarding Earth, he was well aware of the current plight of mutants. A victory against a mythical demon, a powerful mutant capable of directly confronting an abyssal lord. This would undoubtedly become the most powerful bargaining chip to change the minds of certain high-level officials. Moreover, Yi Feng did not feel dangerous to him, and even Sorcerer Supreme Ji Yuyi held an attitude of tacit approval towards him. This meant that Yi Feng's existence would not endanger the survival of this world. Thinking of this, he walked towards Yi Feng, raising his hand to pat his shoulder. If you have the chance, why not visit Kamar Taj? I believe Sorcerer Ancient One would also be willing to meet you. After speaking, he swiped his sling ring, opened a sparkling portal, and stepped into it, disappearing. The Sanctum Sanctorum did not need worldly honors, the glory of this battle, let it be for Yi Feng and those who needed it. Your Holiness, are you all right? As soon as the mage from the Sanctum Sanctorum left, Savis quickly stepped forward, his tone filled with unconcealed concern. He looked at Yi Feng, who, despite his torn robes and bare upper body, stood tall, his brows furrowed with a post-battle chill that only intensified the imposing aura on his handsome face. Savis's face paled, and his breath hitched, intimidated by this invisible presence. Yi Feng took a deep breath, slowly reining in his dispersed power. He had only recently begun to recultivate his cosmos, and combined with the different rules of this world compared to his previous one, his control over his power had not yet reached a state of complete mastery. Especially after high-intensity battles, his surging cosmos would subtly overflow uncontrollably. In this world, unreinforced by gods, the power unleashed by his inner cosmos far exceeded that of his previous life. Even though he had only recovered to the early stage of the sixth sense, his understanding of a near-divine realm from his past life, coupled with the element control he gained in this life, meant his displayed combat power was still astonishing. The 10-kilometer radius of earth beneath his feet had become scorched earth, crisscrossed by rift valley, like gaping abyssal mouths. And this was after he had significantly weakened the impact by deploying crystal walls in advance. Such destructive power, if unleashed on the earth of his previous life, which was reinforced by layers of divine laws, might not even be achieved by 3 gold Saint Seiya combining their Athena exclamations. Are all the videos recorded? Yi Feng asked, his voice steady, as if the intense battle he had just fought was merely a routine practice session. Yes, everything has been recorded. It's just, the energy impact of the scene was too strong, so many of the visuals might not be clear enough. Savis quickly and respectfully replied, slightly raising the camera in his hand. After today's battle, Yi Feng was nothing short of a god in his eyes. That was Earl Valak of Snakes, one of the 72 pillars of Solomon recorded in the divine scriptures, a name of immense renown, yet he was directly defeated by Yi Feng and forcibly driven back to hell. Was this something a human could accomplish? It's all right, having a record is enough. The rest will be completed by others for us. Yi Feng said calmly. He intentionally directed his final blow towards the sky, which was not without purpose. At this very moment, the high-ranking officials of many major global powers were probably already in disarray. Things were exactly as he expected. In the United States, in a highly guarded underground intelligence center. The atmosphere in the conference room was heavy, with high-ranking personnel of various levels seated on both sides of a long table, all eyes focused on the head of the intelligence department. Tell us, what exactly is the situation? A man in a dark suit, seated at the head of the table, asked in a deep voice. Officer, this is the emergency intelligence summary. The head distributed the documents in his hand to everyone present. The incident occurred in a small town with a permanent population of over 2,000. Several days ago, an extremely bloody case occurred there, reportedly involving some evil sacrificial ritual, after which residents gradually began to move away. Approximately 1 day ago, the Vatican intervened, with the newly formed Saint Seiya Legion's commander personally in charge. 5 hours ago, the Vatican began emergency evacuation of the remaining town residents. And approximately 1 hour ago, the region detected an abnormally massive energy explosion, with an equivalent yield level that was extremely high. The head paused, then added, therefore, our preliminary assessment is that this incident is highly likely related to the Vatican's demon exorcism operation. You mean, such an astonishing commotion, was just because they were exorcising demons? The man at the head of the table's tone was full of doubt, clearly finding it hard to accept this explanation. It's still a speculation at the moment, detailed intelligence is still being collected. Just then, a young intelligence officer knocked and entered, quickly walked to the head's side, handed over a laptop, and whispered a few words of report. The head's expression shifted slightly, and he quickly performed a few operations. Everyone, please take a look at this. A shaky and blurry video began to play on the large screen. It was precisely the scene of Yi Feng and Valak clashing in the air. Starlight surged, demonic energy soared, and the two-headed dragon roared piteously. Even with the rough image quality, the world-destroying collision still penetrated the screen, impacting the nerves of every viewer. These are segments filmed from different angles by our closest field personnel and evacuated residents, just transmitted back via the secure network. The conference room fell into a dead silence. After a long while, the man at the head of the table rubbed his temples, his voice hoarse, immediately send a formal inquiry to the Vatican. We need an explanation. Not only the US, but inquiries from multiple major global powers flew like snowflakes to the Vatican, all pointing their fingers at the Vatican, demanding the truth about this incident. The capital magnates whom the Pope had contacted earlier also caught wind of the situation and came knocking, but were still turned away by the Pope. He stated that a unified response would be provided. To have caused such a huge commotion. Deep within the Vatican, the Pope put down the phone, his face a mix of worry and shock. He had just spoken with Yi Feng, confirming that he was unharmed, but the turmoil in his heart was far from settled. He immediately set off, accompanied by a retinue of cardinals, to the Saint Seiya training ground. After the battle ended and some arrangements were made, Yi Feng, taking Savis with him, flew directly back to the Vatican at supersonic speed, not lingering at the battle site. At the Saint Seiya training ground, Yi Feng had already changed his clothes and was quietly awaiting the Pope's arrival. Yi Feng. It's good that you're all right. Inquiries from various countries are pouring in. What exactly happened? The Pope hurried forward, his tone both concerned and urgent. As the Pope spoke, a very senior cardinal recalled the symbol Savis had sent back earlier. Could it really be Valak, the Earl who presides over snakes and sophistry among the 72 Pillars of Solomon? His voice still carried a hint of disbelief. Yes. Yi Feng nodded calmly, as if stating an ordinary matter. I fought a battle, fortunately won, and have driven him back to hell. The relevant battle records are all here. He pointed to the camera in Savis's hand. The entire training ground suddenly fell silent, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The Pope and all the cardinals stood frozen in place, momentarily unable to process the news. That was a demon god who struck fear into hearts during the Age of Myths. Yet, from Yi Feng's mouth, it sounded as easy as casually dealing with an insignificant nuisance. The Pope gazed at Yi Feng's calm eyes, finally letting out a long sigh, his expression extremely complex, and murmured, "You did very well, far better than any of us could have imagined." The Pope was no fool. Yi Feng's battle held profound significance. The commander of the Vatican's Saint Seiya Legion had single-handedly suppressed Earl Valak of Snakes, one of the 72 Pillars of Solomon. This was absolutely a major event capable of shaking the current world order. It was also sufficient to change the Vatican's position in the world. The rest, just leave it to us old folks. You get some good rest. The Pope looked at Yi Feng deeply, his gaze a mixture of unspeakable relief and solemnity. At this moment, he was more certain than ever that the deal he made with Yi Feng was the most correct decision in his long career. With the power Yi Feng now displayed, even without the help of the Holy See, any other denomination would be enough to stir up trouble. If that were the case, it would be the Holy See that would be in a passive position. The cardinal stood to the side, tightly gripping the memory card exported from Savis's camera, his eyes burning with fervor. This was not just a video. It was the key for the Holy See to return to the pinnacle of the world. The group silently walked out of the Apostolic Palace training ground, their footsteps echoing rhythmically in the empty corridor. The Pope addressed the high-ranking officials of various countries and major conglomerates, his voice steady and authoritative. In 3 days, the Holy See will issue a unified response to this incident. 3 days. Enough time for the news to ferment and for everyone to prepare themselves mentally. Savis, you and His Eminence were on this mission, did you really encounter a demon? Clarice leaned closer to Savis, her emerald eyes wide, her hushed tone unable to hide her excitement. Although Savis hadn't been of much help, this experience sounded far more thrilling than the vampire missions she had previously undertaken. That was a demon. The 62nd of the 72 Pillars of Solomon in mythology, Earl Valak of Snakes. Under the premise of ensuring safety, why wouldn't she want to see it with her own eyes? It's true. But I wasn't much help. Savis smiled somewhat sheepishly. At least you all have the mutant abilities as a boost, you can still be useful at critical moments. Right, and we still don't know when we'll meet the standard for comprehending cosmos. Estelle said softly, a hint of yearning in her eyes. Right, standing nearby, remained silent, but his lips were pressed white. 3 days, gone in a flash. The Holy See's internal video conference this time was completely open, with signals connected to high-ranking officials from various countries and representatives of world-class conglomerates. Before the meeting officially began, someone tentatively spoke. Your Holiness, is the conflict between the Holy See and the Rockefeller family truly irreconcilable? The Rockefeller side is willing to pay the corresponding price. The Rockefeller family was the financial backer behind that mutant laboratory and the mastermind behind several attempts to hunt down Yifeng. After the news of Yifeng's battle with the demon god spread, they completely panicked. They tried to distance themselves, claiming it was merely the family head's personal actions, unrelated to the entire family. Their funding of the mutant laboratory has long violated the alliance established with Charles. Not to mention, Yifeng is also a victim who escaped from that laboratory and has been repeatedly hunted down. If it were you, would you just let it go? The Pope's voice was calm and resolute. This was not only Yifeng's intention but also his stance. Since Yifeng was unwilling to reconcile, he naturally stood firmly on his side. Yifeng's demands are very clear. Either the Rockefeller conglomerate renames itself the Sanctuary Conglomerate and is directly managed by the Holy See from now on. Or, the Rockefeller family is completely annihilated. The other party tried to say something more, but the Pope raised his hand to interrupt. I suggest everyone first listen to the full report on this incident before deciding whether to intervene. People connected one after another, and faces that held the world's lifeline appeared on the screen. The meeting officially began. Ladies and gentlemen, today the Holy See will provide an official response to the previous abnormal energy fluctuation incident and the inquiries from all parties. Before that, please allow me to ask a question. Do you believe that mythical creatures truly exist? The Pope raised his eyes, slowly scanning each screen. Mythical creatures. What exactly do you mean? A national leader asked with a frown. Demons, gods, and even divine beasts from myths and legends, the Pope added calmly. Could this incident be related to such beings? Everyone present was an astute individual, they reacted almost instantly. What followed was an undisguised tension and unease. If mythical creatures truly existed, if gods truly existed, would the existing world order be completely overturned? The dark memories of the theocratic era, even if not personally experienced, were still etched in history. Precisely, what Yifeng faced this time was indeed a mythical creature. The Pope displayed the images captured by Savas. Eerie runes and distorted patterns were projected onto every participant's screen. This is an ancient sacrificial ritual, intended to summon a hell demon. The one who descended upon the human world this time is the 62nd of the 72 Pillars of Solomon, Earl Valak of Snakes. This demon god, through sacrifice, summoned his avatar on earth. And Yifeng, while on a mission, engaged in battle with him. Before he finished speaking, the cardinal behind him had already pressed the play button. The recording began, a golden barrier enveloped the battlefield, light flowing like a sacred bulwark. Within the barrier, roars and impacts continuously erupted, the earth trembled, the air hummed, clearly indicating that two beings far beyond ordinary understanding were fiercely battling within. All participants held their breath, staring intently at the screen. Had they not already received verified reports, on-site photos, and energy readings from intelligence personnel, they would never have believed this was a real battle. This was simply like a movie scene produced with top-tier special effects. But the earth was truly torn apart, and all life within the barrier was extinguished. This was a fact they had confirmed repeatedly. Mythical creatures, they actually exist. As long as it's flesh and blood, it will definitely fear thermal weapons. Is human technology not enough to fight against mythology? Does the definition of mutant need to be re-evaluated? High-level mutants like Magneto and Professor X might have a fighting chance. Individual power is ultimately limited. We must rely on the collective, rely on technology. But if even a being like Yifeng struggled to this extent? Arguments began to rise in the video conference, and the representatives from all sides grew increasingly agitated. The Pope listened in silence, a barely perceptible smile flashing in his eyes. Yifeng's goal was achieved. His goal, too, was achieved. Although it couldn't reverse the entire situation of mutants overnight, nor could it instantly return the Holy See to the pinnacle of the world. But the fact of the existence of demon gods had cast a heavy shadow over all humanity. And the fear of the unknown is often the strongest driver of change. Yifeng stood outside the door, not entering. But he heard the arguments inside clearly. Where there was controversy, there was still room for negotiation. The conflict between mutants and humans was not necessarily destined. At least, Yi Feng might be able to help with the problem of mutant powers spiraling out of control, which humans feared most. For example, teaching them to cultivate cosmos. Even after the video finished playing, the discussions in the conference room showed no signs of stopping, with low murmurs surging like a tide in the solemn space. An indescribable tension permeated the air, as if even the lights were dimmed. The 72 Pillars of Solomon, recorded in legends, had one truly manifested, which undoubtedly dropped a bombshell in everyone's hearts. And that iconic appearance, a childlike body riding a ferocious two-headed dragon, was almost identical to the mythological description, bringing an incredibly striking recognition. Just by looking at its appearance, no one could connect this eerie existence with Valak, the demon of prophecy and secrets from legends. What makes demons most terrifying is their instinct to beguile and disguise. For mortals with flesh and blood and weak individual combat power, this is almost fatal. Once approached or attacked by such beings, mortals have little chance to even struggle, only to await death. By then, advanced thermal weapons, or even world-destroying nuclear explosions, would be irrelevant to them. If the people are gone, what is the meaning of all this? Even more terrifying, ancient records explicitly state that demons are skilled at beguiling hearts and tempting souls to fall. A slight misstep could lead to becoming their puppets, losing one's free will. At that point, the wealth and status that human society relies on would be powerless to change anything. That concludes the full content of this incident. And I must emphasize one point: hell is real. The Pope's voice sounded again, steady and with an undeniable weight. He scanned the room and slowly continued, according to the secret texts of the Holy See, Mephisto, a lord of hell, has set foot on earth several times. He is an extremely dangerous being. Fortunately, earth also has its guardians, who have restrained him. What has been said today is all. I hope you all seriously consider the far-reaching implications this incident may bring. Just then, tap, tap, tap. Clear footsteps came from outside the door, unhurried, yet instantly capturing everyone's attention. The door was pushed open, and a tall figure entered the conference room. The newcomer had black hair and black eyes, a calm face, and a white robe with gold trim that further enhanced his extraordinary demeanor, as if enveloped in an inviolable aura. It was Yi Feng, the mutant representative recently brought to the forefront by the Holy See. Almost everyone's gaze was focused on him. The astonishing combat power he displayed in the video, resisting the demon, was still deeply etched in everyone's minds. Undoubtedly, his individual strength stood at the pinnacle of this planet, with only a handful of others who could rival him. Among the mutants, another remarkable individual has appeared, someone murmured, inevitably thinking of Magneto, Eric, and Professor X, Charles, who had dominated the world for decades. Those two mutant leaders had long haunted the minds of high-ranking officials and magnates in various countries, like thorns in their backs. And now, this deterrent power was resurfacing in Yi Feng in another form. Yi Feng walked to the front, his gaze calmly sweeping over those present. Taking this opportunity, I would like to say a few more words. His voice was not loud, but it clearly reached everyone's ears, carrying an invisible pressure. Everyone here holds power or wealth. Mutants and humans have never been two separate groups, we are intertwined, coexisting in this world. There has never been an irreconcilable blood feud between the two major groups. The so-called conflicts are more often due to some people's ambition to seize extraordinary power and covet immortality, leading to greed for mutant abilities. He paused slightly, letting the weight of his words settle. And today, I want to tell you something. According to the information I have obtained, the power of mutants can be traced back to the creator of the universe. It is a gift bestowed by God. It's just that this gift is not stable in form. Now, myths are returning, and the truth is gradually emerging. I hope you will no longer cling to internal strife, ultimately suffering mutual losses, and instead give those covetous otherworldly beings an opportunity. Yi Feng's tone remained extremely calm throughout, with little emotional fluctuation, but the powerful sense of oppression seemed to penetrate the screen, reaching the depths of every attendee's heart. When his words fell, the conference room plunged into a long silence. Everyone was processing his words, calculating the pros and cons and possibilities. Yi Feng did not care what they were specifically thinking, his objective had been achieved. The Pope, standing nearby, nodded slightly and gestured to the side. Click. With a soft sound, all video connections were simultaneously cut, and the screens dimmed one by one. Well done. Too much is as bad as too little. Those old foxes are all shrewd. If you had just proposed controlling mutant abilities or targeting the Rockefeller family, it would have exposed your intentions and made people suspect that the Holy See wanted to dominate by force. The Pope stepped forward and gently patted Yi Feng's shoulder, his eyes filled with admiration. The Pope paused and continued, "You only approached from the perspective of group survival and external threats. A few words, combined with the power you displayed, made your persuasiveness even stronger. Especially attributing the origin of mutant power to the Creator, a brilliant stroke. It cannot be verified, yet no one dares to easily deny it. Indeed, since demons have already appeared, who can assert that mutants are not messengers left by the Creator to protect the human world? It's just that myths were extinguished, history was dating, and the truth was forgotten." The impact of this meeting far exceeded expectations and continued to ferment in the subsequent period. Many powerful and influential figures began to secretly search for and screen mutants. Mutants with outstanding abilities who were willing to serve for money and power were recruited, becoming unprecedented protective forces beside those important figures. The situation of mutants was quietly changing. Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. Professor X, Charles, looked at the latest intelligence in his hand, a momentary trance in his eyes. "He did better than me," he murmured. He was well aware of the changes in the outside world over the past month. Even in his own school, a few students had been lured by the attractive conditions outside. The mutant community, in just 1 month, seemed to have elevated its status by several levels. And the turning point for all of this was Yi Feng's battle with the demon Valak. Charles had also not anticipated that mythical creatures truly existed. In another secret base, Magneto, Eric, had a complex expression, clutching the briefing about Yi Feng and several invitation letters from different financial groups. These days, people had been contacting him incessantly. He, the notorious Magneto, once wanted by various countries, had suddenly become a hot commodity in the eyes of some important figures. Yi Feng. Eric softly spoke the name. They had never met, but the other party, in this way, had invisibly helped him turn the gears of fate. He heard that Charles had once gone to see Yi Feng. No one knew what they discussed specifically, but the outcome was clearly unsatisfactory. This young man was definitely not on the same path as him or Charles. He was changing the situation of mutants in this world in his own stubborn way. Of course, not everyone was happy about it. In some dark corners, irrepressible roars erupted. Mutants are heretics. They are monsters who steal divine power. They should not exist in this world at all. What demon? How many divisions does a demon have? Some extremist anti-mutant factions were furious about this. Decades of suppression and exclusion were beginning to loosen in just 1 month. This was absolutely unacceptable to them. Even if only a small number of mutants were currently recognized, this trend was enough to make them feel panic and anger. Meanwhile, in corners of the world, many ordinary mutants who had been living in constant fear also vaguely sensed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Although high-level pursuits had not completely stopped, the intensity was clearly not as strong as before. They asked each other, confused, what on earth is happening to this world? Deep beneath New York City, a secret laboratory, unknown to the public, was hidden. Cold electronic screens flickered in rows, their eerie blue light reflecting on the expressionless faces of every researcher. In stark contrast to the dazzling lights of Manhattan above ground, here there was only the low hum of machinery and the faint clatter of keyboards, a heavy silence that was almost suffocating. Since Earl Valak of Snakes, one of the 72 Pillars of Solomon, appeared, the voices against mutants had significantly decreased. Some in power even began to favor mutants. After being suppressed for so long, suddenly having the opportunity to walk openly on the streets, many mutants flocked to it, bowing in submission. But this false harmony never dispelled the extreme anxieties in the hearts of certain individuals. The laboratory before them was a product of this anxiety. On the other side of the bulletproof glass, 2 crimson points of light suddenly lit up in the dim space, like the opened eyes of a sleeping giant beast. Following this was the friction sound of precise mechanical joints turning, as a 3-meter-tall humanoid robot slowly straightened its body. Its shell was made of a special composite ceramic material, gleaming with a pale, bone-like luster under the cold lights. A researcher pushed up his glasses, his voice devoid of any fluctuation. Third, debugging preparation. Energy core output is stable, neural network synchronization rate is 92%. Data streams scrolled rapidly across the main screen, far too complex for ordinary people to understand. After a moment, he let out a slight breath, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. It's ready, bug fixed. Movement coordination has improved by 17 percentage points since the last test. It's still not enough. An old and hoarse voice came from the shadows. Bolivar Trask sat in a wheelchair, slowly pushed by his assistant to the glass window. His gaze was like a torch, fixed on the gradually awakening mechanical creation. We are missing something crucial. It's not perfect enough. The assistant responded in a low voice. Boss, limited by existing materials, this is already our limit. Over the years, we have analyzed a large number of mutant genes and abilities, and the Sentinel robots have undergone several iterations. But funding-wise. He didn't finish his sentence, but Trask understood perfectly. As the government gradually cut the budget, his Sentinel project, into which he had poured his life's work, was progressing with increasing difficulty. Although the robot before them was the latest generation, it was still far from the power he envisioned. Especially when facing the man who could control all metal. Because of Magneto's existence, they had to abandon all metal materials and turn to developing high-strength non-metallic composite materials. However, their defensive capabilities remained unsatisfactory, and in several simulated combat tests, they were still easily torn apart by high-level mutants. I will solve the funding. As for materials and mutant samples, I already have targets. A glint of obsession flashed in Trask's eyes. He held information on several special mutants in his hand. Their abilities were the key to realizing his ultimate weapon. Demons. Mythical creatures. Ridiculous. Before science, all these should bow down. Humans actually delude themselves into handing their fate to mutants. This is the most foolish choice. He let out a low, cold laugh. His voice suddenly rose, and his withered fingers gripped the armrest of the wheelchair. We have suppressed and purged mutants for decades. Once they gain power, how could they not seek revenge? This is human nature. If that day truly comes, humanity will only be reduced to slaves. The intense emotional fluctuations brought waves of sharp pain to his head. He was old, and his body was already riddled with ailments. He only survived today because of his wealth. But he couldn't stop. Some even say that mutant power comes from gods. Where are these gods then? Have they ever responded to the prayers of their followers? A hint of imperceptible sorrow flickered in his eyes, immediately replaced by a burning resolve. He had to control the future, no matter the cost. Notify the action team. He handed 2 encrypted files to his assistant. Find these 2 mutants. Capture them at all costs. Yes, boss. The assistant respectfully took the documents without hesitation. He had followed Trask for decades. They shared the same fear, the same belief. Meanwhile, in the shadows on another side of the city, a different kind of tension permeated the Brotherhood of Mutants' stronghold. This place was hidden underground in an abandoned factory, its entrance cleverly disguised as a rusty hydraulic door, but inside it was a world of its own. Mystique Raven looked at Magneto, who stood silently by the window, a rare hesitation in her voice. Eric, should the plan still continue? She remembered her youth, many years ago, spent at Professor X's academy. Charles treated her like a brother, but they ultimately went their separate ways. He was born into privilege. His abilities were a gift to him, not a curse. He could never understand what those mutants who were homeless, persecuted, and feared truly experienced. So she chose Eric Lenscher, choosing resistance over compromise. It must continue. Magneto's voice was firm and resolute, without the slightest waver. No one can stop us, Raven. Whatever that guy Yi Feng did, whatever illusion he created for the higher-ups, that's only temporary. He turned around, his eyes holding an unextinguished flame. If mutants do not fight, they will be trampled at the bottom forever. If they fight, they will face even more brutal suppression. This is an unsolvable deadlock. The only way out is to turn all of humanity into us. His voice deepened, but became even more resolute. But you'll die. Raven couldn't help but take a step forward. Eric's existence was not just a leader for the Brotherhood, but a symbol. Losing him, the mutant cause might lose all hope. Sacrifice is inevitable. I have found a way. A flicker of pain crossed Magneto's eyes, but it instantly turned into steel-like determination. He raised his hand, and a metal table nearby trembled slightly. Parts on the table levitated, forming the prototype of a complex device. I have found a way. With this enhancer, my abilities will be enough to cover all of New York. In just an instant, everyone will experience the transformation we once experienced. Their plan was originally nearing the execution phase but was forced to be postponed due to Yi Feng's sudden appearance and the subtle shift in the situation. But they could not wait any longer. Several high-ranking council members who held great power and openly hated mutants were the targets Eric had chosen. He wanted them to also become the very thing they detested. He wondered what expression would be on their faces when they woke up and found themselves mutants. Would it be joy at gaining power? Or despair at becoming an outcast? The answer was about to be revealed. And the storm brought by Yi Feng was far from over. These hateful mutants. William Stryker cursed in a low voice in his underground laboratory, angrily slamming a stack of documents onto a metal workbench. As one of the key figures who had long pushed for mutant suppression policies behind the scenes, Stryker watched as the situation deviated from his expectations. His hatred for mutants stemmed from his own flesh and blood. But it was this destruction brought by kinship that allowed the seeds of hatred to take root even deeper in his heart. Whenever night fell, he would still be startled awake by nightmares, dreaming of his son's uncontrolled abilities and his wife's vacant eyes. Now, the mutant forces, which he had painstakingly suppressed, showed signs of resurgence, making him immediately restless. Something must be done. Stryker forced himself to calm down, his fingers unconsciously tapping the table. He did hold a trump card, a secret weapon that could turn the tide at a crucial moment. But he was still hesitant whether to reveal it now. Even if the mutants' status seemed to have improved, it didn't change their inherent danger. Most mutants simply couldn't control their powers, which was an undeniable fact. Stryker knew that some high-ranking individuals feared mutants even more than he did. Let's wait and see. Perhaps, there will be unexpected surprises. He finally took a deep breath, suppressing the turmoil in his heart. Meanwhile, in a remote town thousands of miles away, Logan sat in the corner of an old tavern, cigar smoke swirling around him. Outside the window, a fine rain was falling, and neon signs cast colorful reflections on the wet streets. He was looking down at a stack of crumpled documents, his brows furrowing tighter and tighter. Ever since parting with Yi Feng, he had been searching for suitable mutants, hoping to add strength to the papacy and to the future of mutants themselves. Ironically, while it seemed like news of mutants was everywhere normally, when he seriously looked for them, it was difficult to find suitable candidates. Is that all? Isn't there more? Logan somewhat impatiently tossed the documents onto the bar, looking at the bartender. The information recorded was all old intelligence. The tavern appeared dilapidated on the surface, but it was actually one of the underworld's intelligence hubs, frequented by all sorts of people, most of whom were unwilling to reveal their identities. Logan came here both to gather information and to pass the time. There is indeed one more. But, this intelligence isn't cheap. The bartender lowered his voice, his eyes meaningfully sweeping the surroundings, and lightly rubbed his fingers together. Money is not an issue. Logan took out a wad of cash from his backpack, counted out the appropriate amount according to the going rate, and pushed it over. Ever since receiving funding from Yi Feng, he no longer worried about money. Funds were regularly transferred into his account. But this made Logan feel a little uneasy. He always felt undeserving. From escaping the laboratory to receiving the elemental blessing, Yi Feng had helped him too much, yet he himself hadn't even managed to find a single person. The bartender finished counting, nodded satisfactorily, and pulled out a slightly aged document from under the counter, handing it over. A newly emerged mutant, with a very special ability, it said she can absorb others' power and life. Anyone she touches comes to a bad end. He lowered his voice even further, as if afraid of being overheard. Although the tavern was noisy with chatter, these words still reached the ears of a cloaked figure not far away. The figure stiffened almost imperceptibly for a moment. But there were too many people hiding their identities here, and no one paid attention. Logan, however, became interested. It sounded like a powerful ability, perhaps fitting the special talent Yi Feng had mentioned. He opened the document, and the name on the first page was Anna Marie. Taking life upon contact. Logan's first reaction was that this ability was too dangerous and difficult to control. He muttered to himself, "Forget it, I'll let Yi Feng decide, perhaps he has a way." Although his voice was soft, it was still clearly caught by the cloaked person. The two words, Yi Feng, made her suddenly lift her head, a glimmer of hope flashing in her eyes. During this time, she had heard many legends about that person. The papacy's Holy Knight commander, clashing with the Blood Clan, even fighting with some supreme existence. It was also because of him that the situation of mutants had slightly eased. The papacy became one of the few places that openly accepted mutants. And her destination for running away from home this time was precisely the papacy. She yearned to cure her terrifying ability, to live like an ordinary person. She naturally wouldn't know that many of these messages were deliberately released by the papacy to enhance Yi Feng's prestige. The old pope was gradually pushing Yi Feng towards the position of successor, and for a mutant to ascend to the papal throne, entering the human center of power, the resistance faced was far beyond imagination. Even within the papacy, it was not a monolith. Logan put away the documents and stood up to leave. The rain had stopped, and the street was filled with the scent of damp earth. He hadn't walked far when he noticed something amiss. Someone was following him. Clumsy technique. He evaluated silently. From the footsteps, he could tell that the other party had not undergone professional training, and their physical fitness was also very ordinary. Thanks to the earth elemental blessing bestowed by Yi Feng, as long as his feet touched the ground, Logan could feel an all-around enhancement, keener senses, more abundant stamina, and greater agility. He deliberately turned into a narrow alley, then with several swift and silent maneuvers, he circled behind his pursuer. "Who sent you?" he asked in a low voice, his bone claws silently extending to the back of the other person's neck. But the next second, he felt something was wrong. The pursuer was small and thin, and an inexplicable sense of danger washed over him. He leapt back sharply, staring at the other party vigilantly. Without direct contact, the sense of crisis quickly receded. "Who exactly are you?" The pursuer seemed startled, hesitated for a moment, then slowly pulled down her hood, revealing the face of a young girl. "I am the person you were looking for. Anna Marie, I heard in the tavern that you know my Lord Yi Feng of the papacy. Can you take me to see him?" She said softly, her voice filled with unease and anticipation. Logan couldn't help but sigh. Sure enough, she was an inexperienced young girl, revealing her identity so easily. But Yi Feng's name was indeed useful. He also breathed a sigh of relief. At least he had found the person. "Wait here. I need to make a call first," he said, pulling out his phone. Inside the apostolic palace, a crisp phone ring interrupted Yi Feng's meditation. He saw the caller ID was Logan and pressed the answer button. "It's me, Logan. I found a mutant. Her ability is a bit dangerous," Logan briefly explained Xiaotauqi's situation. "Send her to the papacy. I will send someone to meet you." Yi Feng didn't hesitate, a slight smile playing on his lips. Anna Marie, codenamed Rogue, also known as Xiaotauqi. He remembered this name, a mutant who could absorb others' memories, abilities, and even life energy through physical contact, and later could even absorb from a distance. The abilities she could gain could last for several years, and her potential was immense. However, Logan wasn't the only one who bought information about Xiaotauqi. One day earlier, at a secret Brotherhood of Mutants stronghold, Magneto Eric Lenscher's fingers tapped lightly on the table, his sharp gaze sweeping over the recently delivered secret report. Anna Marie's name was clearly printed on the paper, along with a brief description of her abilities. "Raven. I need this person." His deep voice resonated in the dim room, carrying an undeniable resolve. Years of experience and intuition told him that the girl's ability was far more complex than merely absorbing life force. If used properly, it might become a crucial link in achieving his ultimate goal. Of course, this would require further testing and guidance, but if successful, a sharp glint flashed in Magneto's eyes, as if he could already see millions of humans transforming into his kin in this revolution. "I understand," Mystique Raven responded, secretly relieved. As the leader and spiritual symbol of the Brotherhood, Magneto could not afford any mistakes. Now that a potential candidate had emerged to complete his dangerous plan, it was naturally for the best. She quickly turned and left. The Brotherhood of Mutants members began to move, heading towards the location where the intelligence indicated Xiao Taoqi was last seen. Logan had just hung up the call with Yi Feng. Let's go. Yi Feng has agreed to take you in. We're going to the Apostolic Palace now, he said to the girl beside him, starting the weathered but well-maintained off-road vehicle. That's great. Xiao Taoqi's eyes instantly lit up, excitement almost spilling out of her eyes. Even if she couldn't completely eliminate this terrifying ability, as long as she could control it with Yi Feng's help and live a normal life, she would be content. On the way, Logan paid attention to the road while trying to learn more. What exactly is your ability? Is it really just absorbing life force? Xiao Taoqi sat in the passenger seat, unconsciously rubbing her fingers. She always wore gloves. I'm not entirely sure either. Her voice softened. But it's not just life force, it seems to be other people's memories, and even more. As long as there's skin contact, it triggers automatically. Her tone became sorrowful as she spoke. Interesting. Let's get going. Maybe Yi Feng really does have a solution. Logan was thoughtful. It sounded like the ability was far more complex than the intelligence described. The vehicle sped along the highway, heading towards the Apostolic Palace. Inside the Apostolic Palace, Yi Feng finished his meditation. He did not open his eyes but directly transmitted his thoughts. Clarice. The clear and familiar voice instantly echoed in her mind. Clarice Fang, who was training, immediately stopped her movements and respectfully bowed on the spot. Your Eminence. Go and welcome a new companion. For specific matters, contact Logan. Yes, Your Eminence, Clarice responded without hesitation. A hint of curiosity arose in her heart. A newcomer. She wondered who it could be, someone Yi Feng personally ordered to be accepted directly without selection. Although she knew the Saint Seiya Legion would never consist of just the four of them, this situation still surprised her. She took out her encrypted communicator and dialed Logan's number. Hello, this is Logan. Mr. Logan, I am Clarice, a member of the Saint Seiya Legion. Your Eminence has ordered me to welcome you. If convenient, please provide your coordinates and any cities you might pass through. Her tone was polite and efficient. She didn't know much about Logan but knew he was an old friend Yi Feng trusted deeply, and in a sense, even Yi Feng's first follower. Yi Feng had vaguely mentioned that Logan might comprehend the mysteries of the cosmos earlier than them. Xiao Taoqi, beside him, heard the conversation and her eyes widened in excitement. Clarice. The mutant known as the Queen of Space in the underground world, who had risen to fame in the fight against the Blood Tribe. There were many legends about her. It was said that although she was only Yi Feng's attendant, her strength was extremely formidable. Logan was also slightly surprised, not expecting Yi Feng to send Clarice directly. But considering her elusive spatial teleportation ability, she was indeed the best candidate. He quickly reported their current location and planned route. Clarice on the other end of the line quickly calculated the distance. Received. You can make a brief stop in XX city ahead. I will arrive in an hour at most. After hanging up the phone, Clarice focused her mind. Her arms slowly moved in front of her, and ripples spread through the air, like waves. A golden shimmering portal gradually formed. Although her ability had not yet reached its peak, capable of opening a passage between Earth and the Moon, traversing thousands of kilometers was no longer an issue. In terms of long-distance movement alone, she was even faster than Yi Feng currently. Buzz. With a slight tremor in space, the portal stabilized. Clarice stepped in, her figure instantly disappearing from the Apostolic Palace. Logan parked the car next to a relatively secluded motel on the outskirts of XX City, told Xiao Taoqi to wait in the room, and leaned against a pillar on the porch, lighting a cigar. However, the cigar was only halfway smoked when his movements suddenly paused. The earth conveyed a warning to him through a subtle vibration. Someone was coming, and quickly, with clear hostility. Trouble has found us, he muttered to himself, his sharp gaze sweeping towards the other side of the city. He smelled that familiar yet repulsive scent. His brother, Victor Creed, codenamed Sabretooth. He didn't think Victor was coming for him. Is he coming for her? Logan's eyes darkened. He quickly gestured to Xiao Taoqi in the room, signaling her to stay hidden, then extinguished his cigar and prepared for battle. After receiving Yi Feng's earth element blessing and initially grasping the seed of the cosmos, his strength was now far beyond what it once was. Moreover, Clarice could arrive at any moment. Bang! A heavy figure crashed like a cannonball onto the open ground in front of the motel, sending debris flying. Logan. It's been a long time. Saber-toothed Victor bared his fangs, like a beast, his eyes gleaming with bloodthirsty excitement, as if eager to tear apart his brother before him. Long time no see, Victor. Logan straightened up, his tone calm, even with a hint of disdain. I didn't expect you to still be so wild. He looked at the other's purely bestial demeanor and compared it to his own more restrained state now. The difference was obvious. He lightly exhaled a puff of smoke, his expression unperturbed. Hand over the girl. Another voice sounded. Mystique Raven emerged from the shadows, her figure graceful, but her eyes were equally cold. Behind her followed several elite mutants of the Brotherhood. Indeed. I'm very curious, what special significance does she hold for your Brotherhood? Or does Magneto have another grand ambition that requires sacrificing others to achieve? Logan sneered. He took a step forward, an invisible force surging from the earth into his body, his muscles tensing slightly as he adopted a fighting stance. I just contacted Yi Feng. This girl is someone he specifically designated to protect. Want to take her away? Then let's see if you have what it takes. Logan's voice was firm and resolute, carrying an undeniable power. Thanks for watching.